OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, bang on 7:30. You're very welcome along. It's Ger and Eoin with you all the way through until 10. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. While Rangers and PSV were playing out a 2-2 draw on the main channel, Israel Olatunde was setting the athletics world on fire from an Irish perspective over on one of the other channels. What a sensational performance from him last night, on.
Yeah, what a night. It was kind of emotional when he was being interviewed by David Gillick and Sweet Caroline was blaring around the Olympic Stadium in Munich.
Sweet Caroline gets a bad rap, that's all I'm going to say.
It kind of does.
When it's your team and they're celebrating, you're like, yeah, this is exactly the moment that I wanted in my life.
It's like seeing the
saccharine and sweet.
Yeah, seeing the birth of a new Irish sporting superstar to the tune of Sweet Caroline actually isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, it was the exact opposite. I was like, this is actually a very, very nice moment.
You were humming along.
I was humming along, yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what the best part about it was? When he actually finds out what happened and he goes completely mental.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you want to see. I have done the thing that I set out to do and I'm absolutely thrilled and nothing's going to stop me from celebrating.
Yeah, I've beaten the most important national record, because let's make no bones about it, 100 metres is the blue ribbon athletics event. I've beaten the most important national record at the age of 20. Like,
at
that
20?
is astonishing. Like, you look at the field last night, Jacobs 27, Hughes, who came second, 27, Azu, now to be fair, is 21, but Volko 25, Fall 30, and then the two finished behind him, Prescott and Chatura Ali were 26 and 23 respectively. So looking at that as your gauge, he's nowhere near the peak of a European sprinter right now. Himself versus Jeremiah Azu, Ireland versus Wales, could be a bit of a rivalry we see on the European stage over the next 5 to 10 years. But you look at how close he came to those medals as well. What was it, 0.04 of, like, obviously that's a margin that needs to be kind of closed over the next few years. But he said it himself afterwards. They were within eyeshot of him. He felt he could possibly have got there, and he will get to that time at some stage over the next few years. It's just dependent on how everybody else develops.
He's also big time. It's like, this is the biggest 5 days of my life. I'm going to prepare well, and then it's like, these are the biggest 2 days of my life. Then it's like, this is the biggest day of my life. And every time he got better and better and faster and faster. And there's very few Irish athletes who've been like that. Dermot O'Rourke strikes me as one of those people who always showed up, apart from the one time when she didn't, at major tournaments, major events. She always was like, I'm going personal best. I'm gonna fight in this race and get ahead of my rivals, no matter what it takes. And there was a bang of that, certainly in the semi-final. Like, commentary in the semi-final was like, what is he close? Maybe made it. And I was like, he's definitely made that. That's like, he's clearly finished second there. And I don't know, there's just like, it's so exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And like, it's interesting you mentioned Derval there. He did an interview with David Gillick as well back in February, I think it was, when his star had just started to rise. And he was kind of talking about how he's not really old enough to remember Paul Hessian, but he name-checked Derval O'Rourke as one of the Irish sprinters who would have inspired him. And I guess seeing that vanguard of Irish sprinters who did manage to achieve great things, and hurdlers obviously, it's interesting hearing him talk about that, because what's going to happen now is that there's a collection of young sprinters right now who are going to be the inspiration for so many people, because they are going to knock off all the records. They're going to become the national record holders in everything. I do think he still has to get 60-metre national record, right? I think Hessian still has that. I could be mistaken on that one, but it definitely didn't have it earlier this year unless he's done it recently enough. So that's kind of the next thing to go. And they're all just going to start dropping like flies over the next couple of seasons, and probably this time next year he'll have the full house.
Yeah, that's great. And like, it catapults athletics back to the back pages in all the papers today, and all of a sudden there's a huge interest. And I think the fact that there's still the 4x100 to come means that there's another day in the sun for him, and people get to talk about him and learn more about him. That's interesting you're talking about. I didn't realise that he'd name checked Derval, because I was wondering, does he know David Gillick was also like amazing?
Yeah, he mentions you as well.
Right.
In the interview. Yeah, it's worth checking out. And yeah, like, there is definitely this kind of a awareness of what those people did for athletics. And like, I guess we kind of like shoehorned ourselves into, the sort of notion that there will never be somebody with the tricolour at the end of a 100-metre race or a 200-metre race, and it's just turned on its head over the last few years, especially at underage level, and some of these young talents coming through now at senior level. And I guess the irony of it all is that now, like when we look at Rashida's performance yesterday, that's coming in the 400 metres, and she's just casually shut up this year and is like, I'm a 400 metre runner now, and I'm a 400 metre finalist at a major championships. And even afterwards she was like, yeah, I'm still getting to know this race, and is in a final. It's just incredible talent.
Yeah. Dahlia Shocknessy says, amazing achievement to come sixth for a 20-year-old. What a future he could have. Yeah, you just really hope that he stays injury free, because it's obviously, they're like honed within a millimetre or a micro, whatever the smaller part of that is, of absolute fitness. So fingers crossed for that. But if he gets an injury free run for the next couple of years, it's going to be an exciting run for all of us. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. Stephen Kisby Jones is going to Green. Stephen Jones is in my head there. The South African Stephen Jones. Is that what we're going to do?
I think there could be something there. Yeah.
Has he blocked you on Twitter yet? Find out. SKG is going to join us on South Africa at 7:55. You had to be there. Episode 4 is Paudie Maher, the legendary tip hurler. We've got sports pages and news today 35. Dr. Colm Kearns is going to join us to talk about a project around tackling online hate in football, which is particularly appropriate today given some of the news. But Deal or No Deal with Phil at 9:10. Things are heating up. And then Eric Donovan and Declan Taylor are going to talk about the Usyk Joshua fight at heavyweight level, which now all of a sudden might be for the winner of this. Do they just automatically go on a run to pick up the vacated belts, or are the belts really vacated? Do we believe Tyson Fury's retirement last week?
And his latest one, I'm not sure. It's always hard to kind of believe a boxer and their retirement. Not.
Well, he was coming back last week, and he was like, "Oh, I always said I'd fight a trilogy."
And then he did a U-turn on that.
Yeah.
So, it's nothing to kind of say that fighters change their mind or are dishonest or anything. It's just that it's a handy thing to unretire from. Not handy in the sense of the physical level, but you can come out of retirement for one fight. It's like, I could do it, 5 million quid. Come out, do one fight and retire again. It's a transaction.
100 million
for someone like him, I guess is possibly what it would be.
Yeah.
We need to get obviously some notable boxing promoters on the case to make those things happen.
A reminder that tonight Off the Ball is back at Vicar Street. It's in association with Cadbury FC, a massive roadshow. Michael Owen, Ian Wright, Emma Byrne and Karen Carney are going to be our guests. It's an exclusive off-air event. All ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. You can get tickets on Ticketmaster. It's otbsports.com/events. A couple of other things that have happened overnight. Joe Schmidt is now officially the attack coach for the All Blacks. Ian Foster is officially staying on. So that kind of wishy-washy press conference at the end of last week from the New Zealand Rugby Football Union CEO has led to a situation where they've beefed up officially the coaching ticket. Does this mean Joe Schmidt's automatically going to be the next head coach? Or what? Is Scott Johnson gone, what about me?
Yeah, because what is it the theory there that they wouldn't hire from outside? So Robertson's obviously technically in the system, and Joe Schmidt was 12 months ago technically outside the system, and now because of this he is within the system and he's in the inner circle, and therefore the All Blacks way can be maintained if he were to be the next in line to the throne. So the thing is, if he's going to be the next All Blacks coach, he would do a pretty good job, you'd have thought, as an attack coach over the duration of his stint there. If he does a good job as an attack coach, you'd think that the All Blacks would do pretty well, and then Ian Foster himself might do pretty well, and he might be able to cling on to power. So it's a tricky enough one. It's remarkable how this has happened for Schmidt, and how I guess he was essentially de facto coach there. We thought he would be before the first test against Ireland this summer. And we all know the ingenuity he brings to the game. It's going to be a fascinating subplot. Maybe we thought here that Joe Schmidt would be better. It wouldn't be a great attack coach after how things ended with Ireland. But I think he probably saw that as a style of play that suited Ireland. And I don't think that necessarily defines him as the way he thinks about rugby.
Well, I think there are definitely parts that he will ensure that there is a very strict platform and a very strict way of playing when opportunity arises. But if you also layer in the skill level that the All Black players have, that's very frightening. So you're giving very super skilled players the structure within which to play. For us, it was too structured. In the end, it became too structured and too predictable. But what if he just added offloads to what he did with Ireland, like where the basketball style one-handed skills that the All Blacks have? That's, I think, this is maybe the worst possible outcome
For Ireland or for the world?
I think for the world. It's like, I've decided to finish coaching. We'll prioritise family commitments after the Rugby World Cup in 2019, Schmidt said in a statement issued by the IRFU in 2018. 4 years is a long time, in fairness.
I know, but he's just issued a statement to his family now, being like, I am done with my commitments with the family. I am now pursuing rugby matters in my life.
It didn't feel real at the time when he said he was going to stop coaching. It didn't feel like that was going to happen.
But it never does.
But why would you say it then? What's the
Because
point
you think you believe it at the time. You think you're saying, I'm absolutely shattered here.
That was my truth, essentially.
Exactly, but like they fully believe it is the truth. Like, these people are unbelievably competitive humans, and for them to stay away from the game for that long just can't be possible. Like, there's always listen to Roy Keane, for example, who says, he won't get back into management, he's happy enough with punditry. I guarantee you in a year's time, even less, there will be another story about Roy Keane linking him back into management. I don't know why I'm using him as an example, he's just the most obvious one. That competitive drug that people can't get in their post-coaching or post-playing lives just can't be replicated by anything else, and Joe Schmidt's exactly the same. Like, and I'm sure his family are fantastic, best family of all time, possibly, and it still doesn't matter unless his family are like 15 rugby union players who he's willing to coach into battle. Like, it's just not the same. You can't have a life and get that same level of fulfillment, I suspect, if you've already achieved incredible things. Like, and as you say, like on a technical level, this is probably going to be exactly what the All Blacks need. Even just kind of looking at it from afar, just giving them the parameters within which they can be brilliant. And I mean, maybe the kind of blunt instrument approach to analysing this is that he didn't necessarily think that the Irish players or some of the Irish players were good enough to trust with offloads or whatever, whereas you would think that he would possibly have a bit more trust in some of the New Zealand players. Now, I'm not sure if that's the truth or not, but you could definitely make that case that maybe the Irish players weren't trusted enough at the end of his reign. Yeah,
it's going to be very interesting to see how they all respond to each other. Like, you'd be surprised if he can't learn from the experiences of Ireland at the World Cup and evolve. And he's had a long time essentially watching how the world of rugby was evolving with his central role, which it didn't last very long. But then he goes back to New Zealand and gets time with everybody, gets time wandering around, looking at everything, and now he's officially getting his hands dirty on a day-to-day basis. It's a very gentle reintroduction to it. And he's had the opportunity to see what the travel schedule is like. It's also short term. If maybe he just comes and does this for the World Cup, they win the World Cup and he rides off into the sunset.
That would be amazing, yeah. I'm sure that's probably what he's thinking as well, or what New Zealand Rugby are thinking. But like, a week is such a long time in this storyline. Like, this time last week Foster was gone.
Yeah.
Now they've got Schmidt and they've just beaten the world champions in their backyard.
And like, if they were to win the World Cup, you presume Foster would stay around for like a victory lap too.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that if Schmidt is successful, Foster would also be successful, and for him to get I still think Scott Robertson's probably next in line, and maybe
hard to know though, right? Because if they win a World Cup, then Foster will get the next World Cup cycle. That's a long time.
Yeah, I guess so.
And
will he get the next World Cup cycle, or will he be like, screw you, I've won the World Cup now at this point, you were the people, like he'll turn around to New Zealand Rugby and be like, you didn't necessarily back me there in my time of need.
I think I would take the 4 years extra if I was like, I got you through a sticky patch and then I won a World Cup, so I'm taking the victory lap here, lads.
Yeah, is there an easier job though than coaching the All Blacks for Ian Foster? Like, can he take a victory lap on something that more resembles an armchair than the All Blacks gig?
Maybe something in England, one of those English clubs, I don't know, perhaps, where the owners are like, you won a World Cup, come and bring half your team with you for the next 3 years in the Premiership.
Yeah, it's hard to know how it'll play out, but are we saying now this morning that they're back in the mix, back in the contention mix for the World Cup next year? I think we probably are. Don't write them off anyway. Yeah,
well, certainly you can understand if their odds were to come in a little bit overnight, you can see why that would have happened. Elon Musk has tweeted this morning that he's buying Manchester United.
Nice one.
There have been rumours that Manchester United are for sale. No one's kind of printed them, but there have been rumours that they are for sale, and so somebody like him could easily buy Man United. That would be, I definitely would say that would add to the level of soap opera that is going on at the moment.
Would it though? I mean,
Yes.
has Manchester United not already reached the point where even the introduction of one of the weirdest billionaires in the world wouldn't make it weirder?
I mean, certainly it would be like the desperation of the scriptwriters has reached new levels.
Yeah,
like
introduce a new character.
What is it? Oh, Elon Musk. He'll do.
Yeah, it's like the scriptwriters. They've just invented dragons, and it's just added a whole new layer to the whole thing. I guess he did tweet before saying I'm going to buy Twitter, and I guess he did eventually do that.
Well, he didn't in the end. Twitter are now suing him because he's trying.
Sorry, what's the story there?
Twitter are suing him because he's pulled out of buying
I
Twitter.
completely missed this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So he
When did this happen?
He didn't buy Twitter.
Oh, right. Okay.
The deal has not been consummated.
I need to keep up the speed
I mean,
on my Elon Musk affairs a bit more, don't I?
Literally, you've seen the story about Google and the Google founder, and I mean, I don't know if the laws in America are different from the laws here, but you should all Google that.
You're not allowed to broadcast this to the nation.
Well, it's just no, you can't. There's the biggest divorce case, I think, since the last biggest divorce case is up, and apparently, yeah, just better stop there now. 7:46 this morning.
Yeah, somebody's becoming very rich. It's the long and short of it.
Well, like he could afford it. Do you know?
Yeah, like who would be his first signing? If Todd Bowley has become very hands-on at Chelsea, you would suspect that Musk would become quite hands-on at Manchester United. Like with the Stretford End reveal at Tifo to honour Elon Musk in a similar way to the way Stamford Bridge did the other day.
Yes, straight away.
Because it's not Glazer.
All of that whole we're the best fans because we're standing up against this thing would disappear. I don't know. At least I'd get a new roof on Old Trafford.
Yeah, can he could he fix and insert a big screen? I guess that's probably one of the big things he needs to do. But I guess people are getting excited about this. Like, I mean, you see a tweet from it. It's like you've got to cling to anything that resembles a new life that gives Manchester United fans life after Glazers, right? So I can see why people will be hoping that this is real, even though the idea itself is pretty terrible.
I don't know. I actually don't know what kind of an owner of a football club he'd be like. You suspect that there'd be a lot of intervention and there'd be a lot of, it's not for the good of the club. It's for personal glory. Let's not beat around the bush here. It's for the advancement of brand Elon. And, you can definitely see how Man United would have a bunch of NFTs and they'd be paying their players in Bitcoin and all that kind of stuff. And it will be like, oh, look how progressive we are. If that's what progress looks like, then fair enough.
Apparently this is a long-running joke on Twitter, according to Musk himself. I'm not buying any sports teams, he says.
Right. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. So
I wish I knew the joke.
I mean, you kind of want to, pay less attention to Elon Musk in your life is one of those good things that you should do. I do think, though, that it's time for us to get to the most important story of the entire day, which is I think we can all agree that Martin Breheny is the preeminent Gaelic football, Gaelic games journalist of this or any other generation, and so therefore when he produces one of his many lists, that we can assume that it is the definitive and final, and he's the C, and I mean that in the old Irish sense of Gaelic games journalism, and so the wisdom that he imparts to us must be acknowledged, accepted, and we must move on from it there and agree that that is the final arbiter of everything.
The salmon of knowledge.
Correct. Well, he's eaten the salmon of knowledge.
Yeah.
He's the kid who's
stuck the finger in.
Yeah, he stuck the finger in the salmon. Well, I just think it's important that we accept this. Do we accept this? Are we on the same page here?
What are we accepting?
Are we wearing the same hoodie? Just
what's going on?
This is ridiculous.
Where do you get yours?
You're supposed to ring me.
Where do you get yours?
In Duns.
No, I didn't get mine in Duns.
So he's going through the top champion of champions, it's called, 1972 to 2022. Right. So are we accepting the premise of my argument here, Owen? Yes or no?
No.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Boylan's Royal Warriors were more than just hard-nosed achievers. So he's a big fan of Sean Boylan's team, which obviously has Coyler and O'Rourke and Stafford and Bernard Flynn and that team. So the late 80s is the team. And and there's a figure here for it. Between 86 and 91, Meath won 24, drew 5 and lost 4 of 33 championship games. No backdoor, obviously, so no opportunity for them after they were beaten. And he's gone through the list of all the All-Ireland champions since 1972. So we're down to the last 6. Meath are 6th, he's decided. Notwithstanding all the praise he's given them, they're 6th. Still to be judged, right? The Dublin team from 2011 to 2020.
They were good at football for sure.
The Kerry team from 75 to 86. They're your favourites, right?
Ever?
Well, okay.
I don't know. Go on. Keep the list going.
Dublin 74, 76, 77.
Okay.
And there's 2 other teams still to be ranked. Who do you think the other 2 teams to be ranked?
Tyrone and Kerry.
Tyrone and Kerry. From what decade is this?
The 2000s.
Right. Team of the noughties, right? Number 6 is Meath from 87 to 88. Number 5 is Kerry. Number 5 is Kerry. 04, 06, 07, 09. Kerry won the 04, 06, 07, 09 All-Ireland finals by an average of almost 9 points.
Yeah, but sure, that's why they're no good, isn't that
Kingdom
right?
team of 2000s did well to lift Sam 4 times, but legacy was weakened by one-sided finals and their inability to solve the Tyrone riddle.
And how long is a decade, tell me?
They couldn't solve the Tyrone riddle.
How long is a decade?
Legacy weakened, Owen. The Grandmaster Flash, Martin Brownlee, has said the 5th best team of the last 50 years is the Kerry team from 04, 06, 07 and 09, which means that Tyrone must be better than them. And so therefore, QED, buddy, they are the team of the decades.
Consider me checkmated by the Grandmaster indeed.
There you go.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
I'm glad that we've solved this
Unfortunately
now.
for you, there's like a whole other swathe of years that are included in a decade. Like there is like a whole other All-Irelands, like the shiny thing called Sam Maguire that Kerry won before that team even started. Like, I mean, when you're judging the team of a decade, 10 years are involved. That's how long a decade is, as opposed to 5 or 6.
Yeah, but the Tyrone team are a better team than the Kerry team, according to Martin Brownlee. I can't fix it on. I didn't bribe the man. I didn't no involvement in like convincing him of this. I didn't, no, he's never watched the show. He doesn't know that this is the longest running gag we have.
It's not a gag.
It definitely is not a gag.
It's not a gag at all.
4 o'clock in the morning, you're like, I'm the happiest I've ever been. I need to just fix this now. Record.
That would be funny if that was like not true. But yeah, like again, the Sunday game montage at the start of the year, team of the noughties, Kerry.
Yeah, I mean Sunday game. What do they know?
Who's gonna beat that?
I would hold Martin Brownlee in much higher esteem than the copy editor of the Sunday game.
I wouldn't.
Let's get this thing out. I've got 50 more of these to do. He's been thinking about this for years.
Yeah.
He's like taking every single piece of GA knowledge that he knows, and he is a GA man. He's taken it all and he's put it together and he's pieced it into the jigsaw. And the jigsaw piece number 6, it means piece number 5 is Kerry, which means at least 4, maybe 3 is Tyrone. QED.
Yeah, it's a bit. I've been humbled.
I'm glad we got to solve this, Owen. It was important to wrap up any loose ends.
We brought in an invigilator and consider the argument invigilated.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. There's one other thing that we wanted to talk about. Patrick Reed. This is the story. I was looking for it in the printed paper, but it's not there just yet.
This is very funny.
What's going on?
Patrick Reed,
everybody's favourite golfer,
has filed a $750 million defamation suit.
A lot of money.
Against Golf Channel and commentator Brandel Chambly. So Brandel Chambly, most people will know as a relatively controversial voice on Golf Channel. A lot of the golfers don't seem to like him. He's had a few issues in the past, but he's now being sued by Patrick Reed because apparently himself and Commissioner Jay Monaghan have defamed Reed since he was 23 years of age. So The Guardian have printed the entire document that Reed and his lawyer have produced, and just some absolutely incredible stuff in it. They say, it is well known on tour that Mr. Reed has been abused and injured more than any other golfer, from fans or spectators who have been allowed to scream obscenities only to be glorified by NBC's Golf Channel for so long. Chambly has become Golf Channel's primary mouthpiece and agent to push his defamatory agenda and inflict severe damage to Mr. Reed, LIV and other golfers signed with LIV. So Patrick Reed seems to be going to bat for a lot of LIV golfers in general. It's not the first time that Reed's had a bit of a head-to-head with Chambly. In January 2020, he sent a cease and desist letter demanding he not repeat accusations that he cheated during a tournament. This was with regards to the two-stroke penalty that he got at the Hero World Challenge in 2019 for improving his line at bunker. Reed says he didn't intend to do so. Chambly kept saying he was cheating. So Chambly kept this going over the years, and he made a remark during the LIV situation that Reed would have no problem playing golf for Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot and Vladimir Putin. And then you've got Reed's lawyer saying this statement is false because Mr. Reed never aligned himself with a tyrannical murderous leader. He's playing golf for LIV, which simply happens to be financed by the PIF, which has invested in and financed some of the nation's and the world's largest and respected corporations. And this is an interesting argument, they say. This would be akin to stating that LeBron James has aligned himself with a tyrannical murderous leader because he plays in the NBA, which has intricate ties to the People's Republic of China, whose government is accused of a current and ongoing genocide against the Muslim Uyghur people. There's also some other astonishing sentences in the document. There's this kind of like put down of Chambly. In this regard, defendant Chambly, a former professional golfer who fell far short of ever rising to the accomplished level of Mr. Reed and the current analyst for Golf Channel, has become golf's primary mouthpiece and agent to push this defamatory agenda. And they also say it is clear what Chambly, on behalf of his co-conspirator Golf Channel, is doing. He has shown himself to be a disciple of the Skip Bayless School of Sports Analysis, the fundamental tenet of which is that it is more important to be loud than it is to be correct. Chambly has followed this false playbook religiously, down to fabricating a feud with an elite at the top of their game. In Bayless's case, LeBron James, and in Chambly's case, first Tiger Woods and then Mr. Reed, in order to leech attention and notoriety. My favourite part of this whole thing, though, is that you've got a situation in this where the lawyer lists the entire list of heckles that Patrick Reed has received on the golf course as a result of what because of what Chambly has said on the Golf Channel. So, according to the complaint, these included personal attacks, but are not limited to: now on the tee, the excavator, you suck, you effing suck, you jackass, you coward, shovel, you piece of SH1T, no one likes you, everyone hates you, good luck digging yourself out of this one, where are your parents, you cheater, cheat, everyone hates you, cheater. You're going to miss this, you cheater. You cheat in college and on tour, and you're a piece of SH1T. Beat the cheater's ass. Sorry, Webb, for having to play with the cheat. Who did you piss off? Why don't you introduce your children to their grandparents? And on it goes. So this guy's listed off the entire. I think Patrick Reed's probably sat down and was like, "This is everything I've heard on the golf course." Right. And the lawyer has said,
not all of that would be Brandon Chambly's fault. Some of it seems to predate Chambly talking about him on the tour. No?
I would have thought so, and also you would have thought that it's possibly the fault of the American golfing public as much as anybody else.
They can't be held accountable for their actions, though, Owen.
So Larry Clayman is the lawyer who is the founder of the conservative group Freedom Watch, which has previously failed in prosecuting defamation suits on behalf of Roy Moore against Sacha Baron Cohen, and a couple of other things. There's this one article who says Clayman founded Judicial Watch, the conservative organisation that filed 18 lawsuits against the Clinton administrator. Clayman left Judicial Watch and then, of course, sued it. He recently sued Facebook for $1 billion for not removing an anti-Israel page, and represented a homophobic preacher in a slander lawsuit against Rachel Maddow, and he sued his mom as well. So that's the very notable lawyer that Patrick Reed has got into bed with. So $750 million.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if anything comes of that, or if it's just actually trying to tie up the PGA's lawyers while they have other stuff going on at the same time. So either way, it's going to be beneficial to the good people at LIV. It's 7:58 this morning. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish your day. Golf is really revealing its true colours, isn't it? The golfers and golf as a sport, like, you know, we knew the truth the whole time, but like now that you're squabbling about money in public, the dirty linen is out and it's like shit stained.
I think Nathan made the point a few weeks ago that if any of these stories came out in any previous year, it would be the biggest golf story of the year, whereas this is like maybe top 20.
It's definitely like a post-Trump situation where the whole thing is in fuego, right?
Yeah, like the whole universe of golf is absolutely on fire at the moment. And like there's other stories as well this morning that we won't even touch on because Reid has kind of grabbed the headlines, and the stories that we won't touch on are also extraordinary golf stories.
Ahead of our Cadbury FC Roadshow tonight, we're going to be deciding on the top 5 most influential Irish players in both the men's and women's game. I think it's figures in some cases, because I think Jack Charlton's in there for sure. A reminder, tickets for the show on Vicar Street are on sale. Ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. You can head along. I'm sure you can get tickets on the way tonight. otbsports.com/events for T's and C's and more. Now, our resident South Africa rugby correspondent Stephen Kisby-Green, aka SKG, is on the line to piece together just what happened to South Africa this time around against New Zealand. SKG, good morning. What happened? You were supposed to smash the end. It was supposed to be the end of the Ian Foster era, but instead you've made them stronger. It's like the Terminator, except like they're T2, and we thought you guys were like capable of destroying them, but you weren't.
I would have thought you would have been happy about that, Ger. We managed to get Ian Foster to stay in his job, and we've also managed to bring Joe Schmidt into the mix, just because that's how South Africa roll. We create the All Blacks dream team that you wanted.
Joe Schmidt on the opposite side of the coaching line to us and telling everybody about our weaknesses and exploiting our weaknesses is our worst nightmares. SKG, give us Scott Robertson playing Harlem Globetrotters or whatever, but actually having Joe Schmidt there is like a ghost of our previous failures, and he's like, I've learned from my mistakes, I've come back, and I'm getting past quarter-final this stage, lads.
Well, I mean, he hasn't tasted that glory yet, so who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
He's also what's interesting to me that he's coming in as attack coach, and quite famously under Schmidt, Ireland were not allowed to offload. Like it's the quite famous, like that's a stereotype that has been gone through the entire tenure. And obviously the All Blacks, the way that they beat South Africa, a couple of key points, but one of the ways they beat South Africa is they managed to exploit the rush defense with the offload. So now if you've got anti-offload Schmidt, well, as the attack coach.
Let me just puncture that pretty quickly here, because quite famously what happened was Ireland became a little bit predictable, but Joe Schmidt's starter plays are the best in world rugby and have been all the way back to his time in Claremont. So what we're saying is, if they get any first phase ball, the quality of their first phase attack is going to be the best in the world. The whole thing about the offloads was, I'm not sure if he actually trusted our style of play, or if he thought that actually the best thing for us to do was to physically wear down the opponent, and you can't do that if you're not going into contact and if you're not drawing them into contact. So I would say it was on purpose that he didn't get us to offload, as opposed to him being allergic or it being a rule that you can't offload. It was like that wasn't his game plan. His team now are very good at offloading, and so therefore he will use that because he thinks that it's to his benefit.
Yeah, I also agree with you there. I think it was more the sake of I was more making a joke there than anything else. I think it was more the sake of the Irish players didn't grow up offloading in high school or in developmental rugby, whereas New Zealand are bred into the offloading. That is what they do from like the time they're knee high to a grasshopper. So like it would make sense that he wouldn't be as averse to offloading in the All Black style that he would be to the Irish style.
So you've heard us say that our worst fears here are that he's going to end up beating us in a big game at the World Cup. That's very possible. It's on the cards that we'll meet them potentially. What do South Africa, do they care about the fact that Joe Schmidt is going to be part of this coaching ticket? Do they think that this is a significant beef up? What was your instinct as a South African rugby supporter this morning?
I was a little bit surprised by the decision, to be honest. Not so much the Schmidt decision, but more the fact that New Zealand have backed Ian Foster as the head coach until 2023. It's the surety that Foster is there until the end of the World Cup. Now, whether or not Schmidt becomes a bit more of takes over more of the pressure, more of the role in the general sense behind the scenes is a different story. I personally would be a little bit worried if Schmidt is the one taking control of the situation more than Foster, because as you rightfully pointed out, the way that Schmidt coaches, it's the starter plays, it's those first phase ball, first, second phase, getting the structures together, which is the one thing New Zealand have been lacking in the past couple of seasons, is that structured play. They've been fantastic on broken and loose play, and they're good at creating that chaos to make it look like they're in complete control, which they have been up until this year. Now Schmidt brings in that extra bit of actual control on the starters play that would worry me as a South African fan, because So the way South Africa get at an attack is their rush defense, and if there's one thing Schmidt will have learned from his predictable Irish sort of, like, I say predictable Irish, like he was the best coach in the world when he was coaching Ireland, and he made Ireland the best team in the world a year out from the World Cup. Then he didn't evolve. I think now with the Blues, he's shown that he's had an ability and an affinity to evolve and adapt, and actually he's made that Blues team a lot better than they should be on paper. And I think that he can do the exact same thing with the All Blacks, and the All Blacks on paper should be brilliant anyways.
Yeah, I do think as well that there's probably a sequence of events where the team spent so much time in its COVID bubble, then came over to this part of the world that they were at the end of their tether. We beat them, softened them up, France beat them, and then they went away and they didn't play any good quality rugby in the meantime except against themselves because the South African teams are no longer there. And then they blitzed us in that first game. Like, you know, okay, we might have been a little bit undercooked because we're just off the plane, etc. And then Ireland played really well, like our two best ever performances in our rugby history, and beat them. Like, there's a load of different reasons why why New Zealand weren't at the pitch of the game until the second test against South Africa. And the truth is probably somewhere between the first and second test against South Africa. They are beatable. They can also kill you if things go right for them.
No, exactly. I think, but there's sort of a microcosm of where the top 4 teams are, or 4 or 5 teams are in the world right now, is everyone can beat everyone on their day, and it actually makes it a lot more competitive now than it has been for the past couple of seasons. But what's particularly interesting is the way the sort of momentum between the Springboks and the All Blacks sort of shifted in the past week. In the first game, South Africa had all the possession, all the territory. I got a lot of shtick for saying for basically taking a brilliant performance from the Springboks and turning it into a major negative. But I was saying that they just weren't clinical enough. They had all the possession, all the territory. They were dominating. They just didn't dominate on the scoreboard like they should have. Now, the opposite of that happened on Saturday, where the All Blacks kind of turned everything that they learnt from all of the things that they were getting wrong in the first test against South Africa, and they fixed it like overnight almost. And that actually will force Jacques Nienaber into a change of mindset as well, and probably change, basically create a doubt in his mind that there is only one game plan in the Springboks. And I mean, he's shown over the past year that there isn't just one game plan. There's a plan A and a plan B, and they can switch between the two. I think Nienaber needs to make a plan C, which is actually an amalgamation of the two game plans at the same time.
Okay, let's talk a little bit then about South Africa. The team selection, they didn't pick the same team for the second test as they picked the first test. So what was that about? Because again, it feels, making the point I think in the office, none of this really matters in the long run. No one's going to remember who wins this year's Rugby Championship when we're this close to a World Cup, unless there's like a massive 60-0 mauling of one team or the other, and then it's kind of history. So you split a 2-test series at home against New Zealand, but you've massively expanded the quality of depth that is available to the squad at the moment. I'd say South Africa are relatively happy with that outcome.
On the surface, probably, but the problem was that 3 out of the 5 changes that they made for the second test were injury forced, and they were majority in the back line, creating a major reshuffle. So you had Jesse Creel starting on the wing, and Jesse Creel is an outside centre, and Creel's been fantastic on the wing whenever he's featured there, but he's not a wing by definition, and anyone can argue that he's the 4th choice South African right wing at best at the moment. So starting him against the All Blacks was a challenge. Then obviously you had Faf de Klerk, who was KO'd in the first minutes on the first test, so he couldn't start. So you had Hendricks coming in, and then bringing in a brand new scrum half in Yankees who hasn't played for the Springboks in a while. That sort of it was injury enforced, and it wasn't necessarily what potentially what Ninaba wanted to do coming into the series. The Joseph Dweba thing is interesting as well because Bongi Mbonambi was named to start the test on the Tuesday, and then 3 hours later, after obviously warming up or training in the practice after the team announcement, he pulled out with a knee niggle, and he is currently not in the squad to travel to Australia.
Okay.
So that situation at hooker is actually a little bit more dire than Ninaba probably wants, and unfortunately, Dweba in Dweba's 2 Springbok test matches that he played against Wales in that second test, which South Africa lost by 1 point, and then he played against, and then he started this weekend. He's kind of shown that there is a bit of a doubt in a lot of South African fans' minds if he is the person that comes in after Mbonambi and Marks, because I mean, obviously everyone's got to grow into test match rugby, and you can't exactly expect him to fire for straight away.
Yeah,
but he's a very physical guy, and he wasn't able to get that physical dominance that you would have expected him to get against the All Blacks, and his line-out throws were some of the worst we've had in a long time since.
Okay, but just to point out to everybody, that's the third choice hooker is your main concern at the moment as a South African rugby fan. That's not a bad scenario to be in. You've got a World Cup, you've got a Lions successful test series, you've got like an evil genius as your head coach. I know you just lost a game, but come on, you've got to be happy.
No, fair. Like I still maintain that we have the 2 best hookers in the world rugby at the moment in Mbonambi and Marks, and a lot of people say that Marks is the best, and he's always starting off the bench, which is interesting. But that's only a positive if we use them correctly, and
but
if we
you
don't
will in
win,
the World Cup, isn't that the point? Like
well,
this is all shadow boxing now. So you don't put everything on tape that you're going to put on tape in the group series or in the quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals of the World Cup. But
South Africa could easily lose Marks in the first game to a concussion.
Okay, fair enough. But you know, we like that's the ball game, and that's why you're spending this time now investing in is it Dweba?
Dweba, yeah.
Dweba. And so he, by the time comes round, instead of us going to our third or fourth choice out half who will have never played, you'll have a guy who's been like beaten by Wales, beaten by the All Blacks, and who is intent at that stage a year later going, actually, you know, I know what this is going to be like. I've got my bad throws out of the way. I think they're managing this perfectly.
Not fair. I mean, it's more. I don't think it's as planned as you're making it out to seem.
Is it not exactly though? Because it does feel like they made significant changes. They didn't pick the man of the match from the previous test in the second test against New Zealand. Because if they'd lost the first one, I suspect they would have been a very different team. Every best available player would have started the second week. Whereas actually, what happened was the team that started against Wales, they started to bring some of those players through. I just feel like they're absolutely clinically looking at this and going, we're going to need a squad of 45 players who will narrow down to whatever it is that actually goes to the World Cup in France. There'll be some players left behind who we need to be able to break glass in case of emergency, and away we go.
I mean, fair. I do think there was a specific game plan and game style in mind as to why they put Marks on the bench. Because obviously, if your starting hooker goes down in training, you'd imagine that the named bench player would move into the starting lineup, and then whoever's in the wider squad would come onto the bench. Now, obviously, that didn't happen. The replacement, the bench player was remain on the bench player. So there was obviously an idea that Ninaba was trying to ensure that the game plan of bringing Marks on as an impact player would work, but I mean, fair. It's more testing out theories and testing out combinations at this point. And as you rightfully point out, no one's really going to worry about this in 18 months' time. It's just, I mean, the fact that Bongi was named as the starting hooker in the first place doesn't really. It's more like a testing depth out of necessity as opposed to testing depth because that's what he wanted to do against the All Blacks. He would much rather have had this option to do it against Argentina.
Sure.
If South Africa were going to Argentina with the hopes of winning the Rugby Championship.
Power rankings update. Are New Zealand back in the top 4?
No.
Where are they?
After one excellent performance where they nullified one aspect of the Springbok game particularly, and that was a breakdown, I don't see that they have fixed all. They've papered over cracks, and I will only be able to legitimately say that they are in the top 4 after they beat Argentina twice and Australia at least once.
I hate to disagree, but the official World Rugby World Rankings, which are obviously always correct, have them up at number 4. They're on 87.76 points. South Africa on 87.78 points. Oof. So in a couple of rounds, we could have a world where New Zealand are ahead of South Africa in the world rankings and therefore a better team than them, unquestionably.
Yes, but at the end of the Rugby Championship, South Africa could be world number 1. So if ifs and buts and all that sort of thing, then we'd all have a lovely Christmas.
Good stuff, SKG. Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.
Right. You can leave your comments on the YouTube stream. You can get us 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs. It's 14 minutes past 8. We're brought to you each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. After the break, we're live with the 4th episode of You Had to Be There, our first in the world of GA, alongside Tipperary hurling legend Paudie Maher. That's next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
Our fan base, Liverpool fan base, is among the biggest bunch of bedwetters. And there's always hysteria. Well, you know what? It's early days.
Jadon Sancho is a bust. He is now trying to come back from being a bust.
I don't think he's a bust
He's
at all.
100%
I don't
a
think
bust.
so.
He's a complete waste of money so far.
No.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
Hello, I'm Karen Carney and I've teamed up with Off the Ball and Cadbury FC for an epic night in Dublin. Michael Owen, Ian Wright and Emma Byrne will be joining us talking tactics, fun and all sorts and just having a general laugh. See you there.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies. Used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
Covering Celtic at that time was a brilliant thing. The atmosphere at Parkhead was always great.
You had to be there.
Nobody ever talks about this game. Nobody saw it.
You had to be there.
Alright, it is the latest episode of You Had to Be There. It's the slot where we ask people for their favourite individual performances, ones that were so good it reminded you about why you fell in love with sport in the first place. We've done some brilliant ones in the past and we're delighted to say it's our first opportunity to do some GAA. Paudie Maher is with us this morning. Paudie, how are you getting on?
Good, lads. Yourselves?
Yeah, good. This is always difficult when you're asked to make a list of 5 things that you've witnessed personally. You're like, actually, I've seen some good stuff. So how did you narrow it down? What did you go about? How did you pick your best and favourite?
Oh God, George, I actually found it very hard because when I was asked to start, I was like, geez, yeah, that'd be easy enough. You'd be able to pick out a couple of performances that. But then as you went through it, then you'd be like, Gina, what about this one? You know, there was different years. I picked other ones. I was like, oh God. And then I could have picked 5 Tipperary ones then. And then I was like, I better put in one or two from different teams as well. So, yeah, it was harder than I thought it'd be now.
We should start with Lar against Kilkenny in the 2010 final because I don't know if there's ever been a better individual performance in an All-Ireland final. What was the build-up to that like? Did you have a sense he was going to go off that day?
Well, Lar had been on the panel, I suppose, about 9. I think he came on in 2001. So he'd been fair experienced at that stage. And Tip hadn't been going that well up to about 2008 or 9 when Liam Sheedy came back in. So, yeah, but Lar started to find form in 2008 and really, you know, pushed it on in 2009 when I came on the panel then. And I think he was nominated for Hurler of the Year in 2009. So, you know, he was really in form and confidence. And you could just see he's really enjoying, you know, I suppose having a good setup, a good management team around him. And he was really reaping the benefits. So, yeah, no, he was. We got bet in the first round of the championship that year against Cork. We got hammered and just through the back door, and you know he got the winning point in the All-Ireland quarter final against Galway, and he had a good performance against Waterford. So there was a performance obviously there. It's not a surprise, but Genie, what he done that day was outrageous. Like,
before we get to the game itself, who would end up marking Lar in training? Like, as a defence, when you were up against him, what were you guys thinking you needed to do to try and break even?
Gosh, he's mad. Like he'd really message your head in training, and you know he just used to be very versatile. He used to roam around. He could be at 10, he could be at 11, he could be at 14, 15. He nearly just try and drive you mad more than nearly concentrating on what he's doing himself. You know, that kind of way. But very hard to mark because you know he's so big. He's actually 6'3". Like he's so tall. He's so strong, even though he might look that, maybe even wide or whichever way you want to put it. But he's so strong, naturally strong, and then obviously he's so fast, as we all seen over the years. So no matter what way he could come at you anyway. He could run at you. He could catch a high ball over you. He could get out in front of you. He was just so cute. And as the years went on, and as I said to you at the start, when you got more confidence and he started enjoying it a bit more, I think he really shunned his performances.
There's a kind of sweet spot here, and it's funny, he's actually the first and second ones that you've picked. We'll get to them in a minute. When you say he's messing with you in training, is he chatting to you as much as anything? Is it like, I'm going to skin you for speed here, like I'm faster than you? Or is it just purely giving you a challenge that you're like, I don't know where this is coming from next?
No, like I suppose I'm the same club as him, so I would have seen a lot of it between club and inter-county. And, we'll just say, for instance, if I was training in a training game at centre back and he knew I'd like to get on the ball and roam around and get on the ball and pick up the breaks, whatever it is, and he'd nearly concentrate on me and train, then he'd try and put me off. He'd say to the younger lads around me in the forward line with him, he'd say, look lads, you know what he wants to do, take him to a part of the pitch that he doesn't want to be, and all that kind of thing. So he was very cute like that, and I suppose he was kind of ahead of his time in his thinking as a forward, as you see now. This was 10 years ago, so, he'd bring you out of your comfort zone. So if he'd say, I'd go in centre forward on Park there for a while, and he'd bring me out the field, or he'd bring me into the corner, completely out of where I want to be playing, that kind of way. So he just used to kind of mess with your head like that. But in fairness, he'd do it in a way too that it'd actually try and make me think, if an opposition player was going to do it to me in a game, what way I'd face it, So that's just the way he was. He was a great character, like.
Maybe this is wrong, but I definitely get the sense that the forwards would have spent a lot of time working with Eamon O'Shea around that time, and that he was the one who was helping them to create the space. And kind of Lar is almost, if Eamon O'Shea was to create in a lab the perfect hurler for him, maybe Lar would be the perfect one, because he can do anything that you want him to do, and he has the skill set and the range of skills that if there's no space, he's going to be able to use his speed to create it. But actually, he still has that size that you need to put somebody who's physically strong on him as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like Eamon O'Shea came in 08 with Liam Sheedy, and you were talking there, he really transformed forward play in Tipperary, and I think he actually kind of transformed it in the country as well. And I think Lar was the forefront of that. He really bought into what Eamon wanted, as in movement, find yourself in different positions, runs off the ball, different things like that. And I picked 2010 here as the first one with Lar, but even 2009 finally against Kilkenny when they beat us, I remember Eamon actually got Lar to play the first half centre forward, which was out of the blue for everyone kind of. But he knew he could get into space, he could pick up breaks, and I think Lar had about 3 points in the first half, and he was really, really in form. I think it caught Kilkenny by surprise as well. So look, that was just the versatility he had and the buy-in he had to what Eamon wanted in the team, and especially in the forward line.
What else was there from Eamon O'Shea, with regards to that forward play? Like, Lar was obviously the most important part of it, but I hadn't realised that the level of innovation that he brought to forwards.
Yeah, you know what? I suppose when you I would be the best person to speak about that, because he would have talked to the forwards a lot individually and as a group, as a forward line. But even over the years, it was all about movement with Eamon, and find yourself into good positions, and there was no such thing as you had to be in a certain position as a different time, the way it used to be 15, 20 years ago. He really wanted movement, and you could even see that from the first goal Larry got in the 2010 final. I think he was 1-on-1 inside, and there was no one inside from about 40 yards, just the way the lads found themselves in positions, So he just really kind of wanted the players to express themselves and be open-minded and play that bit of freedom in the forward line, that I suppose play what you see in front of you. You don't have to be nailed in the corner forward or wing forward or centre forward, that kind of way. So, and he had different ideas then as well. Like, as I said to you there, he put Larry centre forward the first half in the final in 2009. I remember he played Noel McGrath centre forward in 2010 against Brick Walsh, because they knew Brick was going to sit. And he just knew the way Noel could play the game, that he'd Noel nearly playing out midfield, and we were just picking off Noel passes. And I think Noel scored about 6 points. So he just had these ideas, and that's had a lot of this movement and freedom in the forward line that helped them really express themselves, especially the kind of forwards we had at the time.
It must have been very difficult to defend against week in, week out in training. Generally, you're like, oh, Jesus, where is this coming from now?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've often been asked that question. Like, you know, you could be full forward, you could be full back 1 week, you mark Owen Kelly, you might mark Lar Corbett the following week. You could be out centre back, you mark Owen McGrath, or you could mark, you know, John O'Brien. It was just endless, like, and you know, as the years went on, you'd Seamus Callanan, obviously, you'd bubble. So, you know, no matter what day of training, you were getting a different challenge. And I always said that it probably actually stood to us as backs because we weren't going to face much better outside of our own training ground.
The 2010 All-Ireland final, then, obviously, it's a history match where, like, literally the greatness of the Kilkenny team being as good as the Kerry footballers, they can be the greatest team of all time in GA up to that point. Did that factor into any of your thinking? Were you aware of that in the build-up? Because, like, it was the most hyped hurling match that I can remember.
Yeah, you know, I suppose there was a lot of talk at the time, and then you throw in that we played each other in the 2009 final as well, and Kilkenny going for 5 in a row, and then with the injuries they had leading into the game with Henry Shefflin and John Tennyson walking with the cruciates, so there was a fair big build-up. But in fairness, was there any more on the Kilkenny side? It was fairly quiet our side of things in Tipperary. Like, as I said, our training sessions leading into that final, like, they were very quiet. There wasn't many at them. We had the official open night like every team would do before All Ireland. But other than that, and it wasn't as if we had closed doors or anything. It was just, we had our couple of people trickling in, but there was nothing, you wouldn't take any notice of it, like, you know, so you get about your business. So, but yeah, I suppose the whole occasion, the build up to it, as you spoke about there, they're going for 5 in a row. And then that's why I kind of trended Larry's performance as number one as well here, because, you know, to have that performance in a final that was so built up and there was so much on the line, and then for him to do that and make history, like, so yeah, that was probably one of the reasons why it was such a good performance.
What's your own memory of the game and how it kind of ebbs and flows? Because although Shefflin goes off, it didn't really feel like it was going to be a significant impact on whether or not it kind of, that doesn't make any sense either, because he's obviously Henry Shefflin, but it, you know, you still felt like this was nip and tuck really until Lar Corbett scores the goals.
Yeah, you know, and like Henry Shefflin went off after, I don't know how length of time, because early enough, it was half through the first half, early enough anyway. And but like Kilkenny were going for 5 All-Irelands in a row. Like, they had such a good, like, I've said it before, that you take Henry Shefflin out, you have Owen Larkin, you have Owen Larkin, Richie Power, Richie Hogan, TJ Reid, Eddie Brennan, Aidan Fogarty, and that's only having them few there. You could have Michael Fennelly playing forwards for a bit as well. You know, you Colin Fennelly. You had so many players there that to pick from, like, you know, so no matter what, as it was kind of like what we spoke about there with tip training sessions with the forwards, we were marking that no matter who came on you in playing in Kilkenny, you were getting a different challenge and you knew what you were expecting. They were all working very hard. They all fought for the team and they're all brilliant to hurl. So, yeah, I know Henry Shefflin went off early enough, and but even I don't even think Kilkenny lads used that as an excuse throughout the years. I think they said that Tip were very better the team, but yeah, no matter what Kilkenny forward you're marking, they bring a different challenge, like, and yeah, it was nip and tuck until Larry kind of got that goal. It was nip and tuck until the second half, really, until he got the second goal, I think it was. So yeah, no, it was an outstanding performance, to be fair, and really stood out.
A hat-trick in an All-Ireland final, obviously, it's like, yeah, that can't really be bettered. And then in the Munster final in 2011, which is next on your list, there's another Lar Corbett masterclass. Tipperary 7-19, Waterford 19 points. This is Davy Fitz's Waterford team, I think, is it?
Yeah, Davy Fitz was manager. They won the Munster final in 2010. You know, I think it was Davy's last year as Waterford manager, actually. And it was played below in the old Park of Keeve. And I think we changed our management. Declan Ryan had come in, Liam Sheedy left after the 2010 final. So we knew management. But yeah, we got back to the Munster final in Cork. And it would only been a lot of our second Munster final playing. So it was still a big, massive occasion for us. And yeah, look, I think Waterford played an inexperienced full-back that day, where they started him in there, Ger Maher, I think his name was. And of course, as Larry, he sniffed, he knew what was the experience in there, and he made his way in there. And yeah, 4-4 kind of explains itself really in the Munster final. It was just, you know, we won handily enough in the end, but it was just one of them games, and it was like a lot of my top 5 performances I picked for you there. The reason I picked them was because you were leaving the game, you were going, wow, I just thought that was unbelievable. Like, even if I was playing or watching, that kind of way. So that day in 2011 was one of them days where even though I was playing, I kind of left going, Jesus, what is Larry after doing there? 4-4.
Yeah, 4-4. It's like kind of an under 10s game, but it's a Munster final against the reigning Munster champions.
Have you seen in modern hurling somebody on as rich a vein of form as Lar Corbett in late 2010, early 2011?
Well, there's probably different performances, if that makes, like, obviously Tony Kelly, like I could have picked Tony Kelly in these as well, but I probably wouldn't have seen him live. Do you know, that kind of way? To be on television or whatever. But like, Tony Kelly has given some outrageous performances in the last few years, and he's been racking up 14, 15, 16 points. Now, I know he was hitting frees as well, and he's been getting 8, 9, 10 points from play. But like, as regards goals and goal scoring form and being so consistent, it takes a lot to top what Larry has done. And Seamus Callanan has given a couple of performances over the years where he's got a few goals. Gearoid Hegarty, Seamus Flanagan, a few Limerick lads have came out games with a lot of points scored, we'll say. But yeah, as regards goal scoring, I don't think anyone has been in such a richer game of form as Larry was in 2009, 10, 11.
I know it was very difficult to include somebody from Kilkenny on your list, but you had to. We've got Henry Shefflin in. He's next against Galway in the 2012 final. This is a drawn game. Kilkenny 19 points, Galway 2-13 from September 2012. This is the All-Ireland final, the first game. What about Shefflin's performance that day was special?
Yeah, I was at that game myself. My brother was playing. Rowan was playing the minor All-Ireland beforehand. So, Galway were in control that day. From what I remember, they were up 4-5 at half time, and you couldn't, like, Kilkenny weren't firing at all. And like, to me, this performance, the reason I picked this performance was that day, I think Henry Shefflin finished up at Hurler of the Year that year. And he was coming to the back end of his career, like, to be fair. But that day, the performance in the second half from him, they moved him out centre forward, I think. And he really just grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. When Kilkenny weren't firing, they brought on a couple of lads trying to get the thing going. It wasn't going their way. Joe Canning got to go in the first half, but he really just picked them up. It was like he just picked the team up by the scruff of the neck and says, right, lads, come on, I'll bring you to either win this game or bring us to a replay, whatever it was. And he was just unreal. He just came out centre forward, one puck outs, one hard ball, worked his arse off. I think he only got, I have it marked down here, I think he only got a point from play. He scored 12 points overall in that game, but it was just his sheer leadership in that second half that I actually left that game thinking that was one of the first times I really seen a player show that leadership really stood out on the pitch on his own and just picked the team up by the scruff of the neck. And as the game finished up, dragged them to a replay, and they won the replay. But that really just, to me, emphasised, I suppose, Henry Shefflin's leadership. I suppose his influence in the game and his influence in the team and the squad. So that's the reason I picked that one. That was the reason I left Croke Park that day thinking that was unbelievable second half performance for Henry Shefflin. And, he's been there since 99 and it's 2012, and to produce that performance at that stage of his career, I just thought it's outstanding.
And when you talked about the quality of team he was in earlier, but for them to underperform almost collectively while he was capable of doing that and making sure that they didn't go out of the championship that day, I think anybody who's there will remember that forever, because that's kind of a signature performance from Henry. There were other great performances from Henry where he would score 2-8 and he'd destroy a team, and like that he'd pick on the weakest link of the opposition. But that day it was like everything was failing against an opposition who I think had already beaten them in the championship that year and who were on the verge maybe of becoming a great team, and they just said, oh, no, it's not going to happen. And it set Galway back years, I think, losing that one. Did they go on and have, is that when the management team ends up splitting from the players afterwards? So it sets in motion this kind of, it's one person saying not today, and it's also the greatest hurler of all time doing that. You're like, well, that's pretty impressive. So fair enough, I think that's definitely worthy of a place on the list.
Yeah, I said there, it was just one of the moments I left Croke Park and I was going, geez, that was an unbelievable performance to bring your team back from the dead, nearly single-handedly, and that's why it stood out in my mind. As I said, I don't even think he got man of the match that day. I think I think when the Galway, was it Olatunde or someone got man of the match for Galway in the middle of the field that day, like, so like it just goes to show it. But like for me as a player at the time and looking back even now, when I was thinking back the other day about what performance I pick, he just, for some reason, that just keeps standing out in my mind. And I think his teammates and Kilkenny people would understand why I'm picking that performance.
Seamus Callanan in 2015 against Galway, poor Galway, second time in a row we've picked on them today. But this is the semi-final against Galway in 2015.
They won this major.
What about Callanan? Is this the 3-9 in defeat? Is that day, is it?
Yeah, it was. He scored 3-9, 3-4 from play.
That's not bad.
No, that was just, yeah, even I was playing myself centre back, and it was just, even you could, when it was happening in front of your eyes, you were just like, is that actually him again? You know, that kind of way. Is he after getting another score? He was just on fire. Like that, we were speaking about Larry there earlier on about, you know, when Eamon O'Shea came in, that Larry really, his career, his performance really changed him for years. Like, likewise, Seamus Callanan there, especially from 2014 on, you know, and when Eamon was manager 2014-15, that his game just changed. It went up a couple of notches, like, you know, and this game kind of really was the explosion of that for all the world. Yeah, we probably didn't hurl as best as we could have that day, but the game was a cracking game, really close. It was the start of a trilogy semi-finals 3 years in a row where we were separated between Tip and Galway by a point either way. They won in 15 by a point, we won in 16 by a point, and they won in 17 by a point. But that performance, you know, in 2015, you know, personally for Seamus, was just unbelievable. Like, you know, even we lost by a point, you leave and you go, Jesus, like, what is after? That was unbelievable. Like, you know, 3-4 from play, 5 frees. I think Padraig Mannion started on him full back. They had to move him out. They put Dahi Burke in full back. You know, and they're not, I know they were unbelievable players and are still unbelievable players for Galway. And he was just making ribbons of everyone that came near him, like, you know, so it was just unbelievable. 3-4 from playing Ireland semi-final to be on the losing side, like, you know, it was just, I remember seeing him after the match that day and we were all devastated, but he was just heartbroken because you'd think that'd get you over the line on any given day, but unfortunately it didn't.
He's a very different type of hurler to Lar Corbett, but I guess physically, I presume anyway, they're fairly similar. So which of the two was harder to mark in training, Corbett or Callanan?
Yeah, that's hard. They're kind of two different players to mark. Larry's kind of a roamer, a freestyle, where I suppose Seamus really nailed down his spot as full forward from 2014 on and never really moved too far from there. You know, both probably the same height, both probably the same strength, and I'd love to watch the race between the two of them, see who'd win it, because over 100 metres, because two of them are like lightning. You know, but yeah, very hard to mark. I suppose Larry's probably that bit better in the air than Seamus was, but Seamus improved that as the years went on. I actually think that day in the 3-4 from play, I think he actually caught 2 balls out of the sky to score him. So that's after defeating my reason there, who was better in the air. But yeah, in general, no, Larry probably had the edge in the air. But yeah, Seamus was just, you know, I often marked him over the years in training. I was full back, he was full forward. He's so quick off the mark, 5-6 yards burst left or right, like he's gone. And he used to like to play a lot from behind. He'd like to come in behind you and make a run behind you. You know, play the defender from behind. So it's very hard to see what way he was going to go. Whereas Larry might make a move out in front of you. So, but yeah, you know, very difficult to mark. I would have marked him a few years over in club games as well. But geez, yeah, that day he was just unstoppable. Like, and there was another performance in 2016, the final against Kilkenny. He scored 13 points and 9 from play. I could have very easily put that in, but I said, if I will, they'll all be given out. I picked just tip ones.
That semi-final, right, as you say, it's the trilogy of years. Galway didn't really do themselves justice in the final against Kilkenny. The following years, you point out, you actually annihilate Kilkenny in the final, and that's Michael Ryan's first year. So this is Eamon O'Shea's last game as manager. I was always really disappointed that we didn't get to see that final that year, because it felt like yourselves and Kilkenny were the best teams in the country. You can't say that after you lose a semi-final. I suppose it's not fair, but of all the defeats that stick out, does that one still rankle the most?
Yeah, it's a bit of an itch, all right. We'll say I think Tip had this succession plan in place that it was going to be Eamon's last year anyway, and Mick Ryan was going to take over. It was one of the first times he's done it, but like Eamon was such a big part of all our careers. That group, you know, he got us going in 2009. You know, he came back in 2013 to take over as manager for them few years, and like you do anything for the man, you know, you literally die with your boots on for the man, and that was one of our biggest hopes, I suppose, is to try and win All Ireland for him. And especially being his last year and against Galway, he's living up in Galway, he's working in Galway. We know what it meant to him to win that game. So yeah, it was devastating in that point of view. And I suppose I said to you to start, we just felt we didn't play as good as we could have that day. I felt Galway gave it everything, and that got them over the line. I just felt that we left a few Habib notches of a performance behind us, and only for Shamey's outstanding individual performance, you know, we could have been further away. But yeah, very disappointing. As I said, we drew Kilkenny the year before in Ireland, beating in the replay, so it'd be nice to get back to 2015 to play him again, but just unfortunately weren't good enough at the time and the day.
Last one here is Gearoid Hegarty against Kilkenny in this year's All-Ireland final. It's definitely one of the all-time great All-Ireland final performances.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I was over the game. You know, just like, it's very easy to look back now when the final whistle is gone, but even we were talking about at the game afterwards, that the way it finished up and the way Kilkenny fought back, and, you know, as Kilkenny do, they never give up. They're always hanging in there. Didn't play that well, but like, if you take Gearoid Hegarty's performance out of that game, we don't know what way it would have went in the finish. You know, so he really dictated that day, you know, throughout the game. You know, he scored 1-5, but he was winning puck outs. You know, he was getting on breaking ball. There was no one, like, they moved Paddy Duggan onto him, they switched more lads onto him. They just wanted him to get a grip of him. And it was just one of them days that I know myself as a player, and he'd probably say the same thing, Gearoid. He was just playing, it was just freedom. The ball was following him around the field. It was just one of them days that everything was working out for you. And it was one of the best performances I've ever seen live anyway, without a doubt. It's just, you know, if as I said to you, if you take his performance out that day, Kilkenny could have got snuck a victory, like, you know, but he just kept Limerick going. Even when Kilkenny started coming back into the second half, he got on outrageous scores from off out the field. He was winning frees, he was winning puck outs. You know, he was getting the frees that he was getting through, and he was getting advantage and just taking the frees. So to me, it was just, we were saying at the time, we were laughing, we were saying, geez, why don't Kilkenny just put someone on him and man mark him and skip to follow him everywhere to go? But they tried it and it just didn't work. Like, and in fairness, they brought on the big tall fella, David Blanchfield, wing back. I think he got a point, and he caught a ball over to Gearoid Hegarty as well in the second half near the end. But Gearoid answered back, I think, with a long range point or something to get him over the line. Or, like, you know, it was just outrageous performance, and it was one of the best I've ever seen live in the flesh anyway.
No, it was absolute genius for sure. One last thing, you're involved with Liam Cahill. That must be pretty exciting, because you know intimately how good the group of players are at the moment, and also we're just talking about Gearoid Hegarty there, so you know what the challenge is like. How are you enjoying that?
Yeah, sure, obviously, it's very easy days yet. Like, everyone's smack bang in the middle of the club championship, so yeah, it's quite enough in our part at the moment, but I'm just delighted to be asked to be involved again. I suppose, you know, I'm only gone over, you could say, a season, so not everybody gets the opportunity to come back in as soon. And, you know, I really missed it, being involved with a group, and missed it, I suppose, being involved in a high performance setup and that competitive, you know, setup. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be back, and privileged and honoured to be asked by Liam, and hopefully I can offer something back to the group and the management team, and yeah, see, can we get the show back on the road again next year. And
do you know what your role will be yet? Have you got into the nitty gritty of that? I suppose it's difficult when there's no training sessions or even conversations to be had with lads.
Yeah, I'm just part of the management team, selector, and helping out whatever way I can, and helping out the coaches, Mikey Beavens and that. So yeah, looking forward to now. It's going to be a great challenge. Yeah, obviously it's different for me, but already you're thinking of different things. So yeah, it's a great challenge, and one I'm looking forward to. And yeah, get the club championship out of the way then, and get the ball rolling.
Well, listen, we wish you the very best of luck with it, Paudie. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
It's tip legend Paudie Maher giving us his 5 selections for You Had to Be There, and we'll obviously do that again next week. It's 8:43 this morning here on OTB AM.
It was so unexpected.
You had to be there.
All right. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Off the Ball has gone back to Vicar Street in association with Cadbury FC. We have a massive roadshow coming your way tonight. Michael Owen, Ian Wright, Emma Byrne and Karen Carney are our guests. It's off air, so you got to go and see it there. You have to be there. otbsports.com/events is where you can get tickets, and ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. We will see you tonight. John, good morning.
Ger and Eoin, how are you doing?
Very good. What's happening?
Cristiano Ronaldo, I was looking for this on Instagram. He responded to some account and talks about, they know the truth when they interview in a couple of weeks. The media is telling lies. This is about him. I've got a notebook, and in the last few months of the 100 news I made, only 5 are right. Imagine how it is. So Cristiano Ronaldo unhappy with the coverage about him at Manchester United. A lot of the back pages this morning saying that the club is happy to cut its losses and let him go. Gary Neville has tweeted out in the last few moments, why does the greatest player of all time, in my opinion, have to wait 2 weeks to tell Man United fans the truth? Stand up now and speak. The club is in crisis. It needs leaders to lead. He's the only one who can grab the situation by the scruff of the neck. As Man United today were linked with Casemiro, the Real Madrid midfielder, with the Adrian Rabiot deal apparently hitting the rocks.
The Rabiot deal is really interesting. If you were to look at the epidemiology of a failed transfer, where they're interested in a player who is available at a certain price, they must have an idea very quickly about what the cost will be in terms of wages.
Yes.
But it leaks. It gets made public, potentially on the Rabiot side or on the Juventus side. Fair enough, right? So you can't control that. But what you can control is what you know in advance. And it's a week and a half. Is it 10 days? Was it a Monday that the Rabiot thing first came out?
It was a Monday, it was a Monday.
So yesterday, in fairness, it's a full week of Rabiot in the news cycle.
John Murta meeting him, the mother, all that kind of stuff. Remember when Jota signed for Liverpool? It was just done. What? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Signed.
Yeah.
And that's the way business should be done. It should be done.
I think Luis Diaz was fairly similar. Nunez was a little bit of like, Nunez is available. There's a couple of clubs who were interested, but then they just went and did it.
Yes.
Like
even City signed, was it Gomez yesterday? Like all these things are just happening quickly, and it's like, well, it's just business as usual. And you would have thought, even back in the Ferguson days, United would have just signed players like that, So, I think Ronaldo in 5 years and 10 years' time, if he looks back, I think he might regret the way this is finishing, because he hasn't looked like a guy who's a charismatic, encouraging leader. He looks like a guy who's very much upset about the fact that the talent is leaving the body. And there's a mopiness, there's a moping, and there's a sulking vibe to his kind of demeanour that I've seen. So
I wonder who's doing the interview, and is it a situation where he's waiting 2 weeks to do it because he won't be a Manchester United player when he does the interview?
And throws the whole
why is he waiting? Like, I think Neville's actually right there. Why is he waiting 2 weeks to do so?
Who is going to take him? Like, really, that's the conundrum, isn't it?
So, like, why can't he just do it now? What's the game behind waiting 2 weeks? The deadline is in 2 weeks, obviously. So that's why I'm thinking maybe he would be at a different club.
Yeah, there's only one man who really knows, Jorge Mendes. So, it's interesting to see as well, lads, Irish lads getting first team football and well involved last night at the Championship. Michael Obafemi, Ryan Manning both scoring for Swansea in their 2-2 draw with Millwall. Josh Cullen playing for Burnley against Hull, 1-1 draw. Andrew Omobamidele in the Norwich team that beat Huddersfield 2-1. Troy Parrott, Robbie Brady, Alan Brown all playing for Preston as they drew 0-0 with Rotherham United, and they had Chidozie Egbene in attack. Mark Sykes sent off for Bristol City against Luton. Bristol City still won the game 2-0, but that's good that's promising stuff for Stephen Kenny. And maybe 30 years on, maybe the Championship is the old Premier League in terms of the quality, and maybe like having players playing regularly in the Championship will be good enough for international football going forward,
So the news on Adam Idah is getting better. He's returned to training, but is not yet ready for. So he was expected to train. Yesterday was the first time he was expected to train. I haven't heard an update yet on that, but once he's back training, give him a couple of weeks, and then you hope he gets in the team, and then all of a sudden, almost all of our players are fit and playing at the moment.
Yeah, and what we want to see from Adam is a few more goals. because he's obviously very good at holding the ball up and got a good physical presence, and it's just a case of scoring goals. I'm excited about Troy Parrott. I think Troy Parrott has clicked to a degree, and I'm excited what he will do this season with Preston. I do think that I've a better feeling about Troy Parrott than I would have had, say, about a year ago.
Yeah, and you can see that the pitfalls of young players making it early.
Dele Alli? Well, anyone?
Aaron Connolly?
Yeah.
You know? Dele Alli in the news today because...
Besiktas.
I mean, it was inevitable that he wasn't going to play anymore for Everton because of the weird transfer they did, where every time that he racks up a certain amount of games, they have to give loads and loads of money to Spurs. It's like, what? We're not doing that. Why do we agree to this deal?
It's a sad one for Dele Alli. You know, back in the Pochettino days, he was almost unplayable at times in that kind of pocket role, and then went to the World Cup with England and all that kind of thing. And it's a sad demise, but that is football. It can happen sometimes. Obviously, the big story this morning, folks, is Israel Olatunde, the new Ireland, the fastest man in history in the blue ribbon event of athletics, the 100 metres, 10.17 seconds. Crying on the shoulder, David Gillick. It's a beautiful thing on Twitter. And 20 years of age. Nigerian parents moved here in the late 90s for a new life, and he was born in Drogheda, grew up in Dundalk, and UCD student, and Rashida Adeleke as well this evening. It's just a great story, all over the papers, and his reaction was quite heartwarming really to see it. Yeah. We were even speaking on News Talk Breakfast about, those moments in our lives when we felt really, really proud to be Irish, and that was one of them last night, definitely. I don't know about you guys, what you think of the past. Obviously, Stuttgart and Genoa were huge moments, but that was another one last night. How much better he can be? Well, though he finished the race really well. I don't know much about him in terms of 200, but
he doesn't run the 200.
Yeah,
which it's funny because after the semi-final, it was like, well, he finished really strong. What if there was another 100 to go? But apparently, he's just a specialist 100 at the moment.
At the moment, yeah. We'll see how that develops. I mean, he's still so young, and he obviously has raw materials to be able to become a national champion at 200 at the very least.
Yeah. And also it opens up more opportunities at Diamond Leagues and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, more exposure, and as you say, John, it's the event that he's in. The possible ceiling for this guy's star now is unlike many of the other Irish superstars that have come through in athletics over the last few years. That's just the reality of the situation. This is the race. This is the race that it's so rare for an Irish person to be involved in, and it's unbelievably exciting.
What do we think of the kit?
I like it. Why? What's going on with the kit?
Not very green, I thought.
Oh yes, you did say this yesterday. It's a darker green than usual.
Yeah. Well, I noticed the day before, and I was like, "Where's the Irish competitor?" And then like, "Oh, it's the one wearing the South African jersey." It's like
that looks like a cross, doesn't it, on the?
I think it is, yeah.
Yeah, it is cross.
But that's his, not on the jersey.
It looks like it's actually on the jersey. Yeah. I suppose I didn't kind of twig that, which is interesting. So yeah, Thomas Barr is also involved in action today, and as I said, Rashida Adeleke in the final of the 400 metres this evening.
Kieran McGean on Friday.
Yeah, probably hard for Rashida to medal this evening, but she's had a long season and a very good season. Joe Schmidt, as we know, been escalated up the ladder in New Zealand, now the attacks coach, with Ian Foster keeping his job. And it was interesting to see. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall of that PGA Tour meeting yesterday with Tiger Woods. It was Tiger Woods has entered the chat, getting off that private jet, and Alan Shipnook is really funny on Twitter, like they were tracking the jet leaving.
So what happened, sorry?
So Tiger Woods, there's a BMW Championship in Delaware this week. It's a part of the FedEx playoffs. So apparently Tiger Woods hosted a kind of a powwow at Adair Manor with all the top players in the PGA Tour that are not defecting to live, and there was another one of those yesterday. So Tiger Woods and Ricky Fowler got off the private jet and straight into a Nissan and then drove off to the meeting. So,
John, sorry to interrupt. That's really interesting. The powwow at Adair, has that been confirmed? Has that been like...
Alan Shipnook's reported that.
Because at Adair Manor at the Pro-Am, I remember Gavin Cooney asked Shane Lowry that there was a players meeting the night before day 2 of the Pro-Am, and he flat out denied that happened. He said that he wasn't there and that there was no players meeting. It'd be interesting to then kind of like find out how well... They obviously try to keep this very much in-house then.
Well, according to Alan Shipnook, who you'd have to trust his reporting over the last year, it's only the top 20 players are at this meeting yesterday. with Woods. It's not the whole PGA Tour. Like, this is a separate thing, but it's the Rorys, the Jordan Spieths, these types of players, Scotty Scheffler, Will Zalatoris, that obviously their Tigers come in, the big cash arrives into the building and said, look, folks, we want to.
I'm going to make you all very rich continuously. I'm going to continue to make you all richer, is what he's saying. I will continue to lend my name and my brand to your stuff.
Don't leave the PGA Tour, or otherwise I'll get very annoyed and you'll have my disapproval.
Right. John, good stuff.
All right, lads.
Thanks for that. More from John, of course, on Saturday afternoon and Off the Ball on News Talk. It's 8:54. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Would Elon Musk be worse than the countries buying up football teams? Imagine the infrastructure he'd build stadium-wise. If he bought them for $5 billion, they'd probably be worth $6 billion the very next day, says Shifty Lad. Man United aren't going to be sold for $5 billion. They're like an $8.5 billion is the price, I suspect. You can't get them for. The Denver Broncos are 5.6 or more. Man United much bigger than the Denver Broncos. Unofficial Kildare fan page says Naas winning at the weekend means they're over 1,000 days unbeaten in all competitions in Ireland. Some underage clubs play in Kilkenny. Is there room for a county like Kildare to challenge in the future? I mean, yes. Like,
Naas is an absolute behemoth.
It is time. They are becoming a super club, and you know,
like, it's hard to know, will it become like an All-Ireland level team, like one where they can actually win the All-Ireland? I know they came close last year, or is it going to be like kind of like a Portlaoise situation where it's kind of like a localised dominance, like a club a similar size to Kilmacud Crokes? By all accounts, Naas, it's the potential is there to do unbelievable things, and maybe that'll bring your beloved Lily Whites to the next level in both codes as well.
Well, you'd hope so. You'd hope that it can certainly be influential in that. It's 8:55. Ahead of our Cabri FC Roadshow tonight, we're deciding on the top 5 most influential figures in Irish football in both the men's and women's game. A reminder, tickets for the show in Vicar Street are on sale now. Ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football. Check out otbsports.com/events for T's and C's and more. After the break, Dr. Colm Kearns of DCU is in studio talking about the Tackling Online Hate in Football project. First, the lads on the news round last night talking about the dark arts of football that took place during Liverpool's 1-1 draw with Crystal Palace. Take a look.
I think a lot of the conversation around Núñez and how he's responded to it, and the whole welcome to the Premier League, and this is a different, type of defender that he's going to have to come up against now, is nonsense. Like, we're talking about somebody who grew up in Uruguay, for God's sake, where like the dark arts were invented in a cauldron in Montevideo. He's absolutely fine with dealing with the fact, like, he's played in Portugal for the last couple of years. I'm sure in what you call the Premier League over there, they're absolutely fine at kicking lumps out of him too. It's just a case of, I guess he's probably trying to adjust to a new league, regardless of where it happens to be, with a bit of more expectation around him than possibly there would have been before. He'll probably be okay, judging by the amount of judging by the goals he scored so far, both pre-season and in that game against Fulham. But it was really interesting. Like, anybody who has, like, the Premier League hasn't taken it down pretty much everywhere by this stage, I'd recommend checking out that full compilation of Anderson and Núñez, because it's pure entertainment, and it's just brilliant defensive work from Anderson to niggle at somebody to the point where they try and stick the head in you not once but twice. Núñez tried to go back with his head originally, and then there was another push, he turned around and he went in face to face. But yeah, Anderson, Jesus, and Palace in general, making a really fine start to the season. Probably didn't deserve to lose to Arsenal on the opening day. They have a really good squad. There's so many players in there that I really like. Eberechi Eze is probably one of them. Elise as well, coming off the bench yesterday, is a fantastic player. Needs probably a couple more years to reach his peak. But Palace should, again, be a pretty entertaining watch this year. Núñez and Liverpool, they seem to have a bit of a hex on them. Dave McIntyre, this time last night, suggested that maybe this might be the season where Liverpool, just because they've been up there for so long, maybe fall away this season. That's probably a case to be made from the first 2 games, and that could well be true.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Ron. It could be a bit like Borussia Dortmund in the late stages of Jurgen Klopp, where the players have been pressing, running incredibly hard, and that fatigue has to catch up with you. And in Liverpool's case, like last season, having a quadruple run that went down to the final day with all 4 of the competitions, previously having to fight Man City in 90-plus point seasons. After a while, all that pressing, all that running has to catch up with the team.
Yeah, and I know it'll be a gripe of many Liverpool fans that their additions haven't been overly plentiful, and I think Harvey Elliott has been repurposed as a new signing about 4 times at this stage. New squad number, new contract, and the poor lad he seems to have replaced about 3 different players now. But I think they could definitely be doing with midfield additions there. You saw the keenness with which Thiago was rushed back for that Champions League final shows the reliance in Klopp's mind, or the notion that he is a fundamental player in the team, and any sense that those midfield cogs were interchangeable. I think he has become increasingly important, and the flip side of that is, can you rely on him to stay fit for any period of games the latter part of his career? And in fact, large swathes of his career would suggest not. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did a little bit of business even against their better judgment now, because this title race, if we can call it that after 2 games, could get away from them. And not just them, like, there shouldn't be a reliance on Liverpool to make this interesting. There's other clubs there who've spent lots of money, but I think they don't want to be looking at a situation at the start of September where they're out of sight with Man City already.
More news around goodness coming your way at 7 o'clock on Off the Ball and News Talk this evening for you. Now, I'm delighted to say Dr. Colm Kearns is with us in studio. He's involved with the Tackling Online Hate in Football project. Colm, good morning to you. We've talked a little bit about this before, so I guess by way of introduction to the audience, what is the Tackling Online Hate in Football project?
Well, it's a project funded by the Irish Research Council and the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council that combines cutting-edge quantitative data analysis of abuse of footballers online with nuanced qualitative interviews with all of the relevant stakeholders in this issue. So we're talking players, club officials, grassroots anti-hate organisations, tech professionals, policymakers, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to come up with a appropriately multifaceted and nuanced solution to what's a really complex problem, because this is something that's, I mean, you've covered it a lot on this show, and a lot of other elements that the media has, and it's really exploded into mainstream consciousness, I think, in a big way since Euro 2020 and the aftermath of the final with the 3 lads missing the penalties for England. But the worry is, in the kind of rush to find a solution to it, there may be some kind of knee-jerk or short-term solutions from politicians looking for an open goal, or from tech companies just looking to kind of polish their records. So what we want to do is just go at this with a certain amount of perspective and nuance. So what we're coming out with is hopefully more long-term and more multifaceted in how it addresses the problem. So
can you talk to us about what you're analysing? Is it specific tournaments? Is it like what are the instances of online hate that you so far have been combing through?
Well, I mean, our ultimate idea is what we'll come up with will be kind of applicable across the board with online hate, but obviously, practicality demands you limit your scope a bit. So our tech guys are looking at, their case study is looking at all of the Euros from both men's and women's UEFA European Championships from 2008, the men's one in Austria, Switzerland, through to the women's one that just finished last month in England, with the idea that we're looking to specifically at the Twitter data around those and kind of trace the evolution of online hate, how it grows, what the different flashpoints are, whether there's any big commonalities or changes over time. Because again, it's an issue that's really popped into the mainstream in a big way, but it's been going on for quite a while, really. So it'll be, I think, quite revealing to see how it's changed over that time, and indeed how it hasn't changed.
And when do you think will you? I mean, not to say when you're going to finish this, but when will we know what the evolution of that has been? What's your?
Well, the project runs till August 2024. Now, I'm conscious that, as I'm saying this, I'm not on the tech side of it, so I don't want to make any promises those guys can't keep. But we're already kind of they've now got all of the data with the women's tournament in England finished. And we're already kind of doing more specific looks at certain things to sort of trace things. So, for instance, we're combing a lot of data recently to do with female pundits and broadcasters in the men's Euro 2020 last summer. And basically a lot of broadcasters across the Anglosphere in UK, Ireland, Australia, America had more female pundits, commentators on their teams, whether that, triggered a subsequent backlash or not. And we've been looking at the reaction to that and kind of, finding the nuance, the different kind of the stuff you see there. So hopefully, like that as an output, I would hope to have it out in a few months' time. In terms of like the overall project outputs, you're looking at another 18 months, 2 years. But again, this is to address what's a long-term problem in a long-term way. Rome wasn't built in a day.
What's your suspicion on when this thing really took an upward spike in terms of online hate on mainstream social media platforms? Like, is it basically as soon as millions of people started using these platforms, there was just this flow of hate, or did it take a little bit of time for that to catch up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always there to an extent. I think what's interesting is if you look at the one of the first things we done was look at all the research into online hate and sport more widely, and what you see with that is a huge upsurge from 2016. Like there's only a handful of papers according to the criteria we used before 2016, and what's the big trigger there is the Colin Kaepernick taking the knee in American football, to protest against systematized violence against black people in America. And that triggers a lot more research, and unfortunately, you also see then a lot of kind of hate, almost like piggybacking, I suppose, on the reaction to Kaepernick in that way. I think it changes too as social media evolves. Like, I mean, infamously, you have I can't remember what year it was, but somewhere at a time in the like late aughts, early 2010s, where like Rio Ferdinand asked Wayne Rooney or vice versa for a lift to training on Twitter.
Really
there's a weird sense of it, not of a lack of distance and an intimacy, and I think it's more when it becomes this big machine, as it were, with more and more people feeding into it. And I think with that brings this sense of distance. There's a lot spoken about anonymity with this. A lot of people we've talked to will argue, anonymity is the main, I suppose, thing that fosters the hate, like so long as people can do it with no danger of being found out. But I don't think that's quite the case, because you have a lot of the people we've encountered, like, their accounts are there. Even there was a FIFA Commission study recently on the most recent AFCON and the most recent Euros that found half of the players in both tournaments were subjected to abuse. And they found, I think it was 80 or 90% of the accounts that were abusing could be traced. So I think it's less anonymity than this sense of people kind of, I suppose, doing it from a space where they feel like they can get away with it, or they're justified in doing it. Like if you're one person with 24 followers shouting at a celebrity with a footballer with millions of followers, it feels, I don't know, like even if it's not anonymous, it doesn't feel intimate, it doesn't feel real or something. And I think like that on some level allows people to do it. But even as I say that, I'm kind of wary of armchair diagnosing everyone with it, because what we have found is you do see a marked difference. For instance, to go back to that paper we're working on female pundits during the Euros, what roughly the reactions to those, you kind of see it in three ways. And one is positive, and that shouldn't be understated. There are a lot of people who are just like, oh yeah, these are really good broadcasters, whatever. Two is kind of like gendered criticism that's like seemingly not heated. It's just like whatever rubbish punditry there from Alex Scott, can't stand that woman, but it's kind of pointed reactions to the gender. And if you search for like whatever other pundits, Alan Shearer, Richie Sadlier or whatever, there's no kind of equivalent like that man is awful. So those ones are sort of more like latent, what you might call latently sexist. And then you have the very conspiratorial stuff where it's like the only reason these people are on our telly is because of some BBC, RTE, ESPN woke agenda or whatever, and tied into other kind of hateful conspiracy stuff. So when I'm talking about the kind of mindset of individual abusers, there is definitely a difference there between people who are kind of swept up in the tide of this and it has become normalized in some way, and they mightn't do it in their daily lives, but social media has become a space where they feel it's okay to do it, versus the people who are very much tied into kind of furthering this because of their own, beliefs in that, like, it's wrong for women to be in football or black people to be playing for England or whatever else it might be.
Is one other aspect of this as well that has mushroomed in that period of time is that people who previously would have felt, I'm not going to express my hatred here because I'll be the only one doing it, that there's a sense of cover from us doing it. If 10 of us Manchester United fans or Middlesbrough fans or Villa fans or Ireland fans all say the same thing, well then they're not going to come after all of us. And then is there also another element where actually there are organised campaigns where, somebody's saying, well, look, let's all just start giving out about this and turn this into something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's something we definitely want to look at later in the project, is how this ties into kind of more organised, say, far right organisations and so on. Like, are they kind of actively fostering this in the way that, say, during the Brexit referendum in Britain, you had, I think it was a third of all Twitter traffic was Russian bots preaching pro-Brexit stuff. Now, I don't know how many of the kind of accounts we found are bots or not, but there definitely is a sense of astroturfing of people artificially kind of getting on this hate bandwagon to further particular causes. So yeah, I definitely think that's there. There's that sense of you don't want to say mob mentality, because mob mentality implies a kind of spontaneity in the mob forming. I think there are kind of like other forces at work, and yeah.
That'd be really interesting to see, because I think anybody who is as online as we are in our jobs, you certainly sense that today a switch has been flicked and this is now an issue, and there's going to be a surge in it over the next while, and then that surge brings people with it who are oblivious to the fact that actually somewhere an organisation has decided that today this is the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, certainly in the stuff like I've come through, you see kind of repeated words, or even literally repeated tweets or Instagram posts word for word that are obviously being kind of derived from some central source. But also, you sort of see people, I suppose, having their outrage stoked in that way that maybe they're not aware that, they're like the person kind of stoking their outrage isn't someone as legitimately or neutrally invested in this as they are. It's someone with a with a cause behind it.
Yeah, these people are being useful idiots by boosting the signal. Lest anybody think this is a Premier League story or an American story, in the Star today they're reporting that a League of Ireland footballer has received death threats in the aftermath of a match on Monday. Cork City striker Lewis Britton highlighted the abuse he was sent on social media after their clash with Waterford. He came off the bench for the First Division leaders, having spent 5 months on loan at the Blues this season. And so stuff included that he'd have his throat slit should he step foot in Waterford again. Other messages saw users wish Britain to do his ACL, urging him to book a hospital appointment and wanting him to suffer a career-ending injury. So this is not an English problem. This is a global problem, and it's an Irish problem too.
Absolutely. And, like any kind of global problem, there's very local specificities to it. So, in the Irish case, you have the fact that a lot of the clubs wouldn't have the facilities at their disposal to police their social media or provide kind of training that rich Premier League or even Championship clubs might have. So that kind of often with some of them, having spoken to people, club officials at League of Ireland clubs, often the social media account might be run on a volunteer or semi-voluntary basis. So you do have people swimming against the tide to attempt to stop this. And what's another local factor too with Ireland, I should mention while I'm on it, is you find a lot of the abuse comes from international users, from gambling. So you'll have these, people placing massive accumulators in Asia and whatever, Bows losing to Pats or Cork losing to Wexford or something will mess it up for them, and they'll be hurling really vicious abuse at the players or club accounts for having done that. And there's obviously limited capacity as to what the clubs themselves can actually do in acting against these people well beyond the jurisdiction of the Garda, on the other side of the world. Yeah, it's funny because we actually have a tweet here from Tom Gary that was actually talking about an NWSL club, Angel City, who've partnered with an English-based safety tech company, Go Bubble, which apparently allows you to plug in your social accounts and protect them from online hate, bullying, racism, etc. And they're the first American professional team to protect a team in this way. Do you see this becoming more of so it's funny, there might be a tech solution to this tech problem as opposed to actually a societal solution to the societal problem. That's the other aspect of all this. The tech companies are probably very interested in this research, going, well, what can we do? How can we stop this? Yeah, and I definitely, it's something we've become aware of as we've gone on. It's this sort of cottage industry and what you might call anti-hate software. And it's, I mean, it cannot be anything but a positive if players aren't being subjected to hate that they wear because of this. But it does have its limits. For one, some of the people we've spoken to within this industry have found that clubs they've offered it to are actually kind of unwilling to take it up, and from what they say, at least, the price is relatively small potatoes when it comes to the budget of a major football club. But they've often found that the clubs are kind of wary of being seen to police their own fan base, and that this will upset it. So it will only become an issue when it begins actively impacting on the player's performance, and then they'll step in. The other aspect to it too is there'll be certain forms of abuse they're more willing to use this technology to police than others. So the tech will kind of flag all of these, comments. Now, I should say these there are a lot of different tech platforms doing this, and the service they offer varies from platform to platform. But by and large, you will flag these, problematic comments as they come in. And what some of them have found is that, say, clubs will be very quick to act on racist comments, say, against, black or just any kind of, players of colour. But say they won't act on homophobic comments. So, and what we kind of speculate this about is because if say Marcus Rashford is getting, anti-black racist Twitter comments at him or Instagram comments or whatever, they're an attack on him personally. But the thing about this online hate is it serves two functions, particularly in a game as global as football. Like, it attacks the individual targeted, but it also attacks who they wider represent. So if you're attacking Marcus Rashford for, you know, being black and playing football, that's essentially like an attack on all black people involved in the game, saying, you know, you shouldn't be involved, or if you are involved, you're going to suffer this racist abuse. So I think is if clubs, you know, see it like homophobic abuse against players, and they're thinking, well, he's got a wife and kids at home, so like this is water off a duck's back. Like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's all that abuse is also serving the function of like to, you know, queer people within the game more widely. You're not welcome here. So that's one limitation with it, in that like it puts it at the I suppose the impetus for solving this problem solely in the clubs, who particularly, this isn't so much in the case with League of Ireland clubs, but particularly with, say, like Premier League, Serie A clubs, you know, they're owned by like billionaires in like from completely other countries who may have really no interest in what we might call like the social good of a football club and kind of, you know, fostering a better atmosphere within a particular community. The other thing too is that like it doesn't actually stamp out the problem at its heart. It, you know, it kind of stops it from getting to source, as it were, from getting to the target. But you know, some of these platforms will give the clients, the clubs, the ability to report the abusing users to Twitter, to Instagram, whatever. But not necessarily all of them will. The other thing I would say too, and I'm conscious that again I'm not the tech expert in this project, but what we have come across so far is that you get a lot of false positives with tech-based moderation. For one, a lot of the research done so far is mainly on like text-based stuff, so, you know, particular hate terms and so on. But obviously emojis and images can be used in a particular way to convey hate, and they can be used in a way that it would be very hard to pick up on. So say like something as innocuous as like, you know, like the vomiting emoji or something, right? Like Ger sends Eoin a picture of like, you know, him and his wife on their like anniversary or whatever. He sends the vomit emoji, just a bit of banter, like, get a room, grand. You know, someone puts up an article about like a player coming out as gay or something, and they attach the vomit emoji. That's clearly like a, you know, this is sick, whatever. Yeah. But you can't really build a technology that combs for an emoji as innocuous as that. Equally too, I mean, even in the text-based stuff, you have a lot of false positives. Like we're doing another paper on kind of this main sponsor brands of Euro 2020 and how they reacted to particular homophobic incidents during that tournament. You remember with the German FA wanting to light the Allianz Stadium in rainbow colours and UEFA not allowing them and so on. So we were doing this, you know, combing our data set for, you know, particular like homophobic hate terms. We got a load of false positives for like Scottish striker Lyndon Dykes, you know. Now that's like laughable, like, you know, just mistaking it, but it's just to underline how these purely tech-based thing, there is, at least in my experience, there is a limit to them. And as good as it is that there are services out there that will protect people from this, I think it would be a worry if particularly the major tech platforms themselves rush to this as, okay, grand.
Well, of course they will, because
it
gets them off the hook. That's the point of all this, is that it allows Twitter and Instagram and whoever else to monetize the hate, because they continue to drive traffic off the hate. And that we found, like, eventually Twitter got rid of Trump from their platform, but they made millions and millions and millions and millions, like, of having him there in the first place. So the responsibility that they bear, it's going to be very interesting to see how much of that comes out over the course of the project.
What's interesting with that is people who've spoken to in say the FAI and in anti-hate organisations in Ireland, I've asked them about their experience of speaking to the tech platforms, because so many of them are based here, you know, their European headquarters. And whether when it comes to kind of charging them with, like, you know, doing something about the problem of hate in football, whether the tech platforms themselves cite practical barriers, like, you know, this is just like the volume of traffic on Twitter and Instagram, on Facebook, on, you know, so on TikTok, whatever, it's just so much we can't police it. Or whether they cite it on ideological grounds of, well, we know it's a problem, but we are so committed to free speech that it, you know, we can't, we won't allow ourselves to step in. And they said, the people from the FAI and from anti-hate organisations said it's very much like their experience has been tech platforms will cite ideological reasons, they'll cite their commitment to free speech. Now, possibly they might say there are also practical barriers, but I do find it interesting that, like, when asked about the problem, their response to it is to kind of double down on this idea of free speech, which is a very important right. But, like, you know, you have an issue here where it's a right that is clashing with someone's right to be protected from abuse and their right to kind of follow or participate in the sport they love without being hounded for it.
Yeah, it's pretty horrific. One of the other solutions to the data issue is that you're doing long form interviews with people, and that's kind of one of the reasons why you're here today, is to ask people who have experienced this to get in touch with their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, what we really want to get is kind of across the board nuanced look at this possible. So like anyone who's experienced or observed online hate in football in the UK, Ireland, anywhere else, we'd love for them to get in touch with us. You can find us on Twitter, TOEF Now, Instagram, TOEF Now. Again, I'm aware of the irony of a project against online hate, but like this is the sea in which you got to swim. You can also email us at info@toef.com. That's TOHIF. And on the website toef.com, on the contact section, there's a text box that people can just write in their experiences with this issue, because we're just fascinated to see. No doubt there's the volume of so much of it suggests that like there is going to be so much going on that we don't know, and we're always wary of leaning or depending on one particular stakeholder's experience of this more than another. So like anyone who's got an observation or an experience of this problem is interesting and valuable to us. So yeah, please do get in touch.
That acronym is Tackling Online Hate in Football, TOHIF. Yeah, okay. And so we'll share all the details on our socials as well. It's really fascinating stuff, and it's important work, and it's great to know that it's being done in Ireland as well as in the UK. So Colm, we're very grateful to you for coming in this morning and sharing that with us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, lads.
It's 19 minutes past 9. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio today. At 1 o'clock, OTB Gold is Manu Petit. Koi Gig is live from 3. Our retro panel is Telling It Like It Is at 4. Inside Harrington's Gaff is OTB Gold at 6. And then the show is live tonight with Richie McCormick as host. You can follow Off the Ball across all our social channels. After the break, we're live with Phil Egan's Deal or No Deal. But first, speaking ahead of this weekend's match against Japan this weekend, Fiona Hayes told Will O'Callaghan on last night's show about the pathway she'd like to see for more competitive women's rugby to occur in this country.
When you particularly look at the Six Nations, the benefit of some of the partial contracts that have been handed out in some of the countries, and particularly the way that England have gone full time and France have got a lot of their players centrally contracted too. If they're going to close the gap, this is a crucial step.
Yeah, this is a crucial step, and the thing about it, Will, is it has to be done correctly. So, obviously England have kind of looked at this, and they're the team everyone aspires to be, I suppose, at the minute, and how they've built their league up and how the players are able to play at their leagues at home and then go on and move into that England camp seamlessly. So I think Greg and the RFU, they're going to have to look at how we as the country are going to be able to do that. Will the players have to move up centrally up to Dublin? If that happens, that's going to affect the league and affect the games that players are getting week in, week out. So it's going to be very hard for them to have a path. I'm sure they have an idea of where they want to go, but it has to be correct, because for such a small country, we can see the rest of the world is pulling apart, and we saw that by non-qualification to the World Cup. But I think by the RFU staying, given these contracts, as well as obviously the Sevens having contracts, they're making a statement that they want to invest in the game, and they want to get to a place where we won't be sitting at home watching other teams playing the World Cup again.
Yeah, I appreciate this is kind of an all-encompassing question, but you get to see things at the grassroots at the moment. When it comes to the pathway for player development, what would your preference be in finding a balance between getting the best possible rugby for the international players, but also perhaps, as you say, not diluting down or ripping away from the standard of the National League?
Yeah, so I'm a bit biased on that, I suppose, because I love the AIL. I watch it. I've played it. I that's how we came developed. When I was playing rugby, you were spotted in the AIL. It probably hasn't been that way in a few years. Obviously players are seen up at a Munster level. So I think they have to really look at who, instead of getting everybody up in Dublin, maybe investing in players, moving them to different clubs to make the league competitive. I'm down in Ballincollig. I'll put my hand up and say there's probably a top 4 in the league that are really competitive against each other, and the rest probably don't compete at that high level and don't give those teams good games. So if we can get the league, really competitive, it brings the best out of players. And if they can do that in their league and then in their cup, and then I suppose from that be picked to move up to a Munster level, and then you get to go up to Ireland, and you have the correct coaches in place on all levels, AIL, Munster and up at Ireland. I think that probably is the best path that I personally think would be good system for Ireland to go on.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB Sports, in association with Cabri FC, are returning with a Monster Football Roadshow. Coming your way August 17th.
Football legends Michael Owen.
If you haven't got that attitude, then you'll never survive.
Ian Wright.
Lots to look forward to.
Emma Byrne.
That's normal, that's all in the game. Level is gone through the roof.
And Karen Carney will be our guests at Vicar Street
as they look back on their playing days and preview the new 2022-2023 season.
This is an exclusive off-air event and tickets are limited, so don't delay. Go to otbsports.com/events.
And remember that the ticket proceeds will go towards supporting Irish women's grassroots football.
T's and C's apply. See you on the night.
Hi, this is Ian Wright, and I've teamed up with Off the Ball and the Cabri FC for a very special night in Dublin this August. I'm going to be looking ahead to the new season, celebrating all that's great about the women's game alongside my former international teammate and dear friend Michael Owen and a couple of Arsenal legends in Karen Carney and Emma Byrne. Tickets for Vicar Street on August the 17th are on sale now, with all ticket proceeds going to support women's grassroots football. So hopefully I'll see you there. Take it easy.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Right, 25 minutes past 9 this morning. We have Phil Egan with us. Phil.
Morning, lads.
How are you?
All good.
I find it hard not to start at Man United, but actually, you know what? I'm not going to start at Man United. I'm going to start in this studio. I got laughed at for saying that Newcastle would finish ahead of Man United. I said this, I'd say last March or April this season. I said that next season, I bet you Man United are going to finish behind Newcastle. I got laughed at in this very studio. No one's laughing now, Phil. No one's laughing now.
No, nobody's laughing right now. Well, the only laughing people are doing is at Manchester United and what a shambles they are. But Newcastle have started okay. They obviously won on the opening weekend. They were quite lucky to come out of Brighton with a draw, but that's why
I'm not saying they're brilliant.
That's why they signed Nick Pope to make saves.
Yeah, and I still think that there's a bit of activity to be done. So this morning news breaks that they've asked to be kept informed about 4 players at Chelsea: Callum Hudson-Odoi, Conor Gallagher, Armando Broja and Christian Pulisic.
Can I just a point of information here? If they end up making a signing like this, you're not allowed to do the victory lap because
I am.
This is a transformative. The whole point that people laughed you out of studio is that Newcastle United didn't do the business that maybe people expected.
No, that was back in March and April. I was saying this.
Money though.
Sorry, of course, and also you're right. I mean, we're 2 games into the season, so it's all finished.
Well, those 4 players you mentioned, I think the one that Newcastle should sign would be Broja. They've obviously got Callum Wilson, they've got Chris Wood, but he would give them something different as well and a bit of depth because Wilson has had injury problems and Chris Wood I just don't think is good enough. I still firmly believe that when they signed Wood, they were signing him to score a few goals, but they're also saying to Burnley, we're taking one of your boys away.
It was good strategy in the short term, and he's a top 10, as in between 8th and 12th striker.
Yeah.
But Broja might be like a top 6 striker.
Well, the ceiling is
much
far
higher. Yeah. And look, next season they'll have a Conference League campaign or something to go through. potentially.
Possibly, yeah.
You wouldn't be surprised if they end up in the Conference League. That's like the level they're at.
They're definitely on the way up, and we knew this was going to happen anyway. Like for fair idea that in a few years, right, it's going to be Newcastle and City going for the Premier League title.
Surely you'd have Conor Gallagher ahead of Armando Broja, though, would you, in terms of a player from that list you'd like to have in your team? I know you're talking...
Probably thinking as well of what Chelsea are willing to do as well, whether they're willing to allow Gallagher to leave. But, you know, he's getting cameos off the bench. It's very hard for him when he got a season under his belt at Palace last season and he was so good and got into the England squad.
But Pulisic could potentially be easier to prize away from Chelsea then, because I guess they've possibly assessed what he can do. I know he's had his troubles with injury.
Yeah,
he's still only 23.
Christian Pulisic.
Yeah.
And Hudson-Odoi, again, a lot of talent, but never really recovered from that Achilles injury. When I say never recovered, just hasn't been able to get a run of games consistently, and he's been tried in a few different positions with Tuchel, including that right wing back position, which I know it's wing back. It's a hybrid position with Tuchel, the way he changes his tactics, which you would have seen from Loftus-Cheek the other day. But yeah, he's probably the most likely, I'd say, of the four to probably be loaned out, or whether he goes on a permanent deal. But
it's hard to know. I think Chelsea at some point are going to start having to balance the books. If the Fofana signing, Fofana looks like he's going to try and push that through, right?
Yeah, you can see why he'd want it, because it doesn't look great for Brendan Rodgers right now that the club are letting players leave, but they're not signing players. And Fofana is thinking, you know, if I play for Chelsea, I'm going to be playing for a better team,
and I'll be rich.
Well, I'm sure his bank balance will look a bit healthier, all right. And do you know what? I wondered with Fofana, obviously we saw how much potential he had, then he had the injury. He's back in now, and I thought maybe he might stick with Leicester for another season because he needs to get back playing regular football. But he could also be thinking, if anything I've learned over the last few years, that football is so unpredictable. When you're at the top of your game, you can get struck down with a bad injury. So he'd be thinking now is the time to move. And also if he wants to maybe get into that France World Cup squad, this could be the time to move. And he could be thinking as well, Brendan Rodgers mightn't be around for much longer.
No, it's hard to know what's going to happen at Leicester. There's a possibility that they sell him and or Maddison, and they sign and they have a load of replacements who are ready to go, who are nearly as good, because their record in the transfer market has been sensational.
Yeah, it has. But then, like, what's going to happen to Tielemans? And they have signed some good players, but they actually, like, say they signed Daka, and we all thought, yeah, this is a brilliant signing, but just didn't get going last season. Now he's still very young, and it takes time to adapt to a new league, and they kind of showed that they were still very reliant on Jamie Vardy. But
is it ridiculous that I hope that they sign Andrew Omobamidele to replace Wesley Fofana if he goes? That there's like
that's not a bad shout.
You know,
I mean,
Premier League experience, similar age profile, talent on the ball, would fit in the team. Like,
he was. Nathan Collins had been linked with Leicester as well.
Yeah, which would have been a good move, but they need to sell him first.
There are two teams that play three at the back, which at the moment that's where Stephen Kenny is. He's playing three at the back.
It's true. Now Dean Smith was playing two at the back last night, according to my live score app. Anyway, I didn't see anything.
Well, they've kind of they didn't start the season great, but they obviously picked things up last night.
I think Dean Smith's a good manager. I think he'll turn things around for them. Anthony Gordon looks like he's ready to force a move as well. So if they sign, big ifs, right? So if they sign Fofana, that's going to be 75-80 million, right? If they sign Gordon, that's another 45-50 million. That's another 120 million. Yeah. They're going to have to sell some of those players to balance the books.
Yeah,
just for financial fair play.
Yeah, I like financial fair play. It exists, but I don't really believe it. So I'm sure there's always a way around it, and
like the tooth fairy.
Yeah. So if they do, I'd be surprised if Anthony Gordon left. Maybe Everton would be thinking this is too good to turn down, this offer. But Anthony Gordon, he's already a bit of a hero in that Everton team. He's as bad as last season was. He was one of the bright sparks. He was one of the positives, a local lad that came in and he made a real difference. It would be a big move for him.
It's a lot of cash, and they'd be able to buy a couple of players extra and just get a bit of depth.
Yeah. Well, I just think Everton are in so much trouble. They need as much quality in that squad as they can get.
Yeah, but do you get two players who are good, who can play, and you double the amount of minutes you're going to get from them instead of Anthony Gordon? And
yeah, you bring in players. maybe you bring in players that have Premier League experience, but it's such a risk to bring in new players that don't have Premier League experience, and you're basically counting on them to hit the ground running, whereas Gordon now has got his bit of Premier League experience.
No, it's fair. So Adrian Rabiot, not going to happen. You were like, this wasn't a good deal in the first place in terms of like you didn't think he was good enough really to influence the team.
No, like I said, he was an improvement on McTominay and Fred, but again, as I said, that's never really a good starting point for any argument to bring in a player.
And you accurately predicted that the mother issue would be important in this, and so it has. Apparently the agent has said no, I'm not getting enough money.
It's not a great start if you haven't even joined the club and there's issues around wage structures. So you want players to come to your club to play because they want to be there, and look, they deserve to be paid what they're worth, but I've always felt with someone like Rabiot, he believes he's worth a lot more. He believes he's a better player than he is. I think he's a fine player.
Yeah, but there's multiple trouble with the wage issues at Manchester United, where he'd be coming in and he'd be underpaid according to like what, say, Jesse Lingard might have got paid in the past, or whoever, and that whole poison is in the club and needs to be extracted before you can fix it.
There's so much to fix at the club.
Get rid of Ronaldo now, irrespective of whether or not you have a replacement.
See, that's the thing. If you were ask me should they get rid of Ronaldo, I would say yes. But if you also said how could you see Ronaldo staying, it would be if they haven't got anyone else.
Well, it might be chicken and egg. You have to get rid of him before you can get somebody else in.
When he's telling us we've got to wait a couple of weeks.
Yeah, what's that about?
To find out the truth, and I find that a bit strange. Does that mean that he's leaving, and then when he leaves he'll say, right, here's what really happened? But
they were not very good.
Yeah. And look,
what truth bombs?
Ronaldo was thinking, I'm at the end of my career. I'm an absolute legend of the game.
Yeah.
I deserve better. I don't want to be playing with some of these chumps. I'm looking around going, I don't need this. I should be playing on a Tuesday and Wednesday night in the Champions League, not Thursday night.
But is he Gene Hackman at the end of the Western with the gun in his face going, I don't deserve this. Dessert's got nothing to do with it, and Clint Eastwood blows his head off? Is that what's happening here?
Possibly. He's
Eric
thinking
Ten Hag is Clint Eastwood.
Well, do you know what? If Ten Hag is going to make this thing work at Manchester United, I always felt that he had to do it without Ronaldo and start from scratch.
Yeah, I would agree.
And build up.
I actually think if there's an offer on the table for Marcus Rashford at the moment, go on. Like, you don't need him, and he's not going to work for you.
Well, do you know what? It's such a disappointment because 3 years ago I was thinking Rashford could be a sensational player and have such a bright future ahead of him, but like many players at Manchester United, it just hasn't worked out for them. But there's a talent there, but so far we haven't seen it at the start of this season, and just even things like he's coming short for the ball. And Rashford, when you watch Rashford, the best version of Rashford is there's space in behind defenders and he runs into it, and you can't live with that.
Casemiro, a good signing?
It'd be a great signing for United, but why is he leaving Real Madrid, the Spanish champions, the European champions, Champions League football? They've signed a couple of young midfielders. He's thinking, I probably won't have to do as much running as I've had to do. I won't have to play every game, and I've got a World Cup to look forward to.
So you can't see this deal happening?
I'd be very surprised. I mean, if you're Casemiro or you're his representatives, it makes zero sense. But
the brand is big. I played for Real Madrid. I played for Man United.
I think this is just like complete notions.
I think it's
like what are Manchester United do? Like the headlines say, eyeing up Casemiro, considering £50 million move for Casemiro, says Sky Sports. Like what? Manchester United considering Casemiro?
Real not very rich, like compared to with what they used to be. That you can get players. I just wonder. So Varane came, and Varane never plays because he's injured.
Yeah.
Casemiro plays. He's fit. He's good. He's durable.
Yeah.
He would actually be a proper.
No, he's an asset to Real Madrid, let alone Manchester. Why would he drop down so many levels to
his contract 2025? I know obviously that adds to the value of the transfer fee, but I just think it'd be madness if you're Casemiro.
Like the thing is about the whole Manchester United situation is that it's got a lot worse from 3-4 years ago. Like people are still dealing in the idea that Manchester United are a great club that are on poor times. They're a terrible club. Like they're in a terrible place.
They're going to finish below Newcastle.
Like possibly, like this idea that there's still a big club that are chasing past glories. Like those glories are a long, long time ago. I could buy that argument when like Angel Di Maria was coming.
Yeah.
Like, but in 2022, I just don't see this at all. That ship has long sailed.
Yeah, the more time goes by, the
further they get.
And that's it. And they have to accept it before they fix it. And sometimes I don't think they have accepted it. But like, there's no doubt, like, they're a massive club and the brand is huge and all. But what's going on in the club, from the ownership to, I don't know what their football, their recruitment department, I don't know what they're doing.
Like, from a footballer's perspective, like that brand, like, people aren't stupid. Like, he's not being like, oh, look at that crest. And
I think you're wrong about that. I think the brand is very powerful.
Broken, by the way, it's cracked.
Like, in what sense is the brand powerful for a player right now?
Well, if you are part of the team who brings it back, you are legend for all time. Like the team that won the league under Ferguson was legend for all time. It's like your Kerry team just broke a famine of 8 years. When the famine eventually breaks for Manchester United, that group we are all-time legends.
Of course.
Like there's a power in that.
Would you not let some of the other lads do the heavy lifting first, where you think,
yeah, exactly.
I just wait a couple of years to see how this project's working out, and then you jump on board.
This is 2 weeks before the deadline.
But I think that if you're Casemiro or somebody of that level, you can actually come in and go, right, Harry Maguire has to go out of the team, you've got to go out of the team, you've got to go out of the team, this is my team now, I'm the captain of Manchester United.
Like Ronaldo was supposed to do.
But Ronaldo was never going to do that because he's not at his peak. Casemiro, we're saying, is close enough to his peak.
Yeah, he's
29, 30.
Why can't Ronaldo do that if he's not at his peak? Like, Ronaldo is Ronaldo. He's
because
one
he
of
was
the
on his way out, and he's nowhere near as good as he used to be, and he can't dominate games the way he was once capable of doing.
It's not about that, though.
That's not his character.
He's playing in a better team, though. He'd score. Like, he's still scored a rake of goals last season. He'd still score goals if they were a more functional team.
This is true.
Maybe someone from within changing, being the person to change the culture of the club. I think that's
Ten Hag is going to make a couple of good signings. If the Ten Hag era is going to work, he's going to have to make a couple of good signings, and those good signings have to come in and seize control of the team. Casemiro might be able to do that. Somebody of that standing would actually change the entire perception of everything around the club, and so that's why I think there's a power in that, and that's the dream you sell to him. That's what I would be doing.
It is a dream.
I think it's a tough sell, though.
It is a tough sell. It is, but
gotta get
these
your
footballers
best
are all
sales pitch in there. I think
Adrian Rabiot thinks he's the world's best footballer.
Yeah,
do you know? Like,
but he's
not that hard to sell to people. But you're the world's best footballer.
But he's sold, like, Rabiot has sold that to himself, though. You got to sell this to Casemiro, who's looking like he plays with Luka Modric every day.
Yeah,
imagine going from Modric to McTominay.
I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult. Right, that's today's Deal or No Deal. It's 9:40. OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Back tomorrow with Gregor Paul of the New Zealand Herald on the back of the Ian Foster Joe Schmidt news that broke this morning. We'll have Jim White and Phil McNulty on talking about their new book, Red on Red, which documents the Manchester United-Liverpool rivalry. We've got combat sports correspondent Alan Dawson previewing Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk Part 2, plus more besides. Now, make sure you tune back into us at 10 to 11 this morning. We're going to be talking live with the man of the moment, Israel Olatunde. That is coming your way on our YouTube and on our sports app. In the meantime, we'll leave you with a preview of Joshua Usyk. Will O'Callaghan and Ronan were joined by Eric Donovan and Eric Taylor last night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Ronan Mullen is with me. We're going to be joined by boxing journalist Declan Taylor and also Irish boxer Eric Donovan in a moment. But Ronan, to set the scene on this one, Usyk very comprehensively wins the title away from Joshua. Very, very impressive last time around to become heavyweight champion of the world. And the pressure is now on Joshua, not just with this fight, but probably for the course of the rest of his career, because there's so much uncertainty about the other belts within this division because of Tyson Fury's situation, and Wilder's obviously hanging around there as a potential mandatory challenger along the way too. This is a huge heavyweight bout in Saudi Arabia this weekend.
Yeah, and like rematches through the annals are the lifeblood of boxing, and I've made for some of the all-time classics. But in this instance, where the narrative of an upset looms over the first fight, and like nominally it would have been an upset in that Joshua was the known name in the general public, but for those in boxing circles, Usyk has been an esteemed commodity for a long time. Obviously, really dominant amateur, brilliant cruiserweight. The only doubt around him when he stepped up to fight Joshua in those terms was size, and that became very clear early on that wasn't going to be a factor. Whether that was down to Joshua's tactics, we can explore with the lads in a minute, but basically the parallel which we were drawing earlier with the Ruiz fight, it is quite different in terms of the dynamic, where that was an upset, a bolt from the blue, and Joshua was able to arrest that in the rematch, whereas he goes into this rematch as the underdog once again with a lot at stake, I think, in terms of his profile in boxing circles and beyond. So yeah, and a lot has changed in terms of he's changed his trainer. Will there be a change of approach? You've got the Saudi element of it all. You've got all that's going on with Usyk in his camp, both professionally and personally. So, yeah, lots of intrigue around this one.
Yeah, lots of intertwined stories as well. Eric Donovan at the moment is getting ready for his own title fight in Belfast next month, but he's taking time out to have a chat to us in the show, and we can chat to you, Eric, about your own preparations in a little bit. But just to take up Ronan's point there, Eric, about what went wrong for Joshua last time round against Usyk, or maybe the better way to frame the question, what did Usyk do right to win the title?
Yeah, I suppose it's one of those questions that a lot of people ask, what happened to Joshua, it was kind of, it reminds me of the time when Floyd Mayweather boxed Conor McGregor. The amount of people that actually stopped me on the street to say, Conor McGregor is going to smash Mayweather and he's going to outbox Mayweather, and you're going to, and some of these people are just I'm just thinking of what are they watching, what are they thinking? Some of the boxing purists, know exactly how good Usyk is. And we've watched him, and I boxed with him on the international scene. I've also boxed with AJ on the international scene as well. And the truth is, Will, that he just came up against somebody that was just far superior than him in so many different areas, in so many different departments. And we saw that on the night. Like, the only advantage or strength that was in AJ's favour was his size and his power. But it's one thing having the size and having the power, but if you can't hit your target in front of you, if you can't hit what's in front of you, then it's, you're going to come unstuck. And that's what happened. He came unstuck in the end.
Yeah, like, I felt, Eric, he was technically outclassed by Usyk last time out, and Usyk made it a very difficult fight for him, and so many of the shots that Joshua tried to land were missing on the night. What would Joshua have to do differently in Jeddah on Saturday night if he's to actually get a comeback win here?
Well, he's going to have to land a shot, so he's going to have to put Usyk up. Like, he's really going to have to start landing some shots to the body and to try and slow Usyk down. He's going to have to throw punches in bunches, and maybe if he misses it one or two, he catch him with the third or fourth. I think he'll also have to take more risks. There is going to be an element of throwing the kitchen sink at him in this fight, and I get the feeling from listening to the interviews from AJ's camp that. And even listening to Eddie Hearn and Frank Clay and these guys predicting an AJ KO, that kind of tells me that Joshua's going to go all out, going to blaze him. But there's a danger to that. That's a very risky business, because Joshua is a big man, 6'6", he's going to be weighing very heavy as well. When he exerts that type of energy where he's going for the kill or he's going for the knockout, he can really empty his tank and he can gas out. So you can't really be too reckless, careless either, because Usyk is the type of so calculated, so clever and cute. Him and Lomachenko they're like both matrix of the game. They watch everything, they collect data, and they're just always one or two steps ahead of you. So he has to be very, very careful in how he approaches this fight. But I wouldn't be surprised, if Joshua comes up. Like, look, Joshua has knocked out Klitschko, Carlos Takam, Povetkin, Ruiz, Pulev, Dillian White. Like, he's got 22 knockouts in his record. So he is a beast. Like, he has the power and he has the force. The only problem is it's landing on that sweet spot with Usyk, because Usyk is so good at movement in the ring. But if Joshua can land it, then it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to feel it. And Usyk, if he gets caught on the chin, on the button by Joshua, he's going to feel it too. But I'm not convinced that he will be able to do that.
Yeah, we've got boxing journalist Declan Taylor with us as well. And Declan, does that frame the fight nicely? You've got in Usyk, a heavyweight who moves like a cruiserweight, and Joshua, who's a heavyweight who should have that knockout power about him. And it's going to be intriguing to see whether Joshua can actually get his hits through to do the damage he's probably going to require if he's going to get the belts back here.
Yeah, I think that's about the long and short of it. But then again, it was in the first fight as well. And it's not how it played out. I feel like Usyk is so unbelievably talented and also so well versed in boxing big orthodox guys. That's what he's done his whole life, that he knows how to handle that. So whereas Joshua never ever until that night in Tottenham had never boxed anything like Alexander Usyk. He'd boxed southpaws before. He'd been stopped by one in the amateurs, but it's a totally different ballgame with Usyk. So I'm with Eric that I feel that Joshua has always got a chance of knocking someone out in any fight, but I feel like he's got a puncher's chance. And it sounds quite reductive, but in this fight I see he's got a puncher's chance. If anything, I think Usyk could get a stoppage in this fight because he's not a big concussive puncher who knocks guys out clean, although he kind of did to Tony Bellew, to be fair, but he's more volume puncher from weird angles, absolutely exhausts his opponent, wears them down, and then might take him out late. All his stoppages are sort of 8, 9, 10th round. And if Joshua really does get on the front foot and try and knock him out, he might exert so much energy that by the 7th, 8th, 9th, he's absolutely knackered. And like Eric alluded to there, he's a big old boy. He's got to carry a lot of weight around. I feel like he gets worn down in this fight and he could well get stopped in the later rounds. Usyk nearly had him out of there in the 12th in Tottenham. I feel like he's going to want to make a big statement because he's left the war zone in his country. This means a lot to him. He even arranged for everyone in the Ukraine to watch his fight, be able to watch his fight for free. I think he's going to go out there and walk Joshua down and try and knock him out. That's what I think. So I don't think it's as simple as boxer against puncher. I think Usyk's arriving in this fight wanting to do damage.
Yeah, like I would echo that as well. And you got the sense, not that Usyk's ever short on confidence, but he had prescribed tactics going into the Joshua fight of outboxing the bigger man. But you could see visibly in how his eyes were lighting up that he sensed an opportunity to get the stoppage and possibly, as Declan said there, could have closed the show, but if he had maybe poured it on earlier, he almost certainly would have. So if he starts with that same ethic this time around, I think it'd be very interesting, and it could be looking at an earlier finish. Declan, I know something that was mooted around after the Ruiz loss, and it seems to be floating around Joshua's professional career at large, is the notion of changing trainers, and he has actually pulled the trigger in that regard this time. Robert McCracken has been with him through that Olympic success and professional success thus far, but he's gone with Robert Garcia, and I'm just intrigued to know, like, there was a lot of potential replacements mooted around that time. He seemed to do the rounds stateside, but what do you think Garcia is going to bring to the table, and will that have any sort of discernible impact at the weekend?
I mean, that's one of the big intangibles in this fight. It's hard to say. It's kind of interesting that he chose Garcia because, like you say, he did the rounds. He saw Ronnie Shields. He saw Eddie Reynoso. He saw everyone. And he chose Garcia. Obviously, the idea, Robert Garcia got a lot of Mexican fighters, people like Marcos Maidana, aggression, and Bam Rodriguez, of course, one of the best in the world at the moment. A lot of aggressive fighters who try and go in there and looking for knockouts. So in the sort of most simple terms, that seems to be what he's looked for. He's gone, right, who can help me knock this guy out? How much can he implement in this reasonably short camp? Not sure. He's still got Angel Fernandez in there from sort of the old camp. Is he already got too many voices in there? He's got Fernandez on one hand. You've got Garcia coming in as a sort of new body. He hasn't got McCracken in the corner for the first time, like you say, since he was an amateur. He's been with him the whole time. And that's not to say that it was wrong to get rid of him, because they'd obviously reached a point where the trust had gone. He claims that McCracken in the corner during the first fight wasn't telling him that he was behind, wasn't telling him you need to get a knockout, wasn't telling him you're about to lose your titles. It was more, keep doing what you're doing. So then he's gone, well, I have to get rid of him then because I can't trust him anymore. So it makes a lot of sense. But is Garcia the right man? Garcia seems to be licking his lips at the fact that Joshua's so big in comparison to Usyk. Just going, my guy is massive. This is basic boxing, big and beats a good little. But I don't think it's as simple as that in this fight. What Garcia is really good at is 60 seconds. And Eric will know this. The 60 seconds that you've got, really more like 50 once you've sat down and once you've got the stall back out. A trainer can make or break that little spell. And I feel like Garcia is one of the best in the business of saying the right things and not saying too much, just saying the right things, saying this is what you need to do in this round, go and do it. Whether Joshua listens to it, whether it works is another matter, but he's definitely got a good man in that regard.
Eric, can you tell us a bit about that process then? I mean, in the case of Joshua, you're talking about a decade plus relationship and then making that change when you feel that that's what's required to take yourself back to the next level and to get himself back at the top of the mountain again. I mean, it's about a year ago you had made the decision to change around your training team as well. Can you just speak to us a bit about that experience of, you know, maybe deciding that you have to make that change and how difficult it is to actually maybe move on from a group of people you were working with before?
Yeah, I actually remember reading up on the reports afterwards from the Usyk Joshua first fight, and about how Rob McCracken was, you know, giving Joshua signals in the fight to say that, you know, you're in this fight, everything's going well. I didn't hear it at the time, even though we watched it, because I was on my stag and we were all in this room, and it was the middle of COVID lockdown as well. But there was this pub in Galway that allowed us into a room, and we watched it on a big screen, but we couldn't hear what was going on between the rounds. But no, look, Declan's right. Like, if the trust breaks down in the corner, you do need to bring in, you know, you do need to change. And sometimes a change is needed. And it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a positive thing. I know he done the rounds, as Declan said, and he had a few trials with different coaches. But Robert Garcia is a very good coach, but he is that aggressive type of coach. Look at the fighters that he's had, Mike Dana, Mikey Garcia. You know, we're talking about Bam Bam, Donaire. They're all aggressive type fighters. He's trained a lot of world champions. So he knows this. He knows boxing, and he's been there himself as well. So he has that kind of the insight as well, because he's been there at the top level in his own career. But I just think that, like, it's very, very difficult to bring in somebody to solve a puzzle like Usyk or a puzzle like Lomachenko. Lomachenko and Usyk are from the same school of boxing, you know, and nobody else could do it. Nobody else could break them down in the international scene. So I think one training camp is going to be it's too short a length of time to be able to expose Usyk or find the blueprint to make that difference. But having said that, and listening to Robert Garcia's interviews, I do get the feeling that he's really up for this, the prospect of this fight. And he does really back AJ's power and strength. And we said that is something that he has that Usyk doesn't have, that one punch concussive power and the force behind it. And, you know, Garcia said, like, you know, AJ has insane power, you know. So I suppose he will be trying to, guide AJ in the fight where he can put him in positions through movement or through different scenarios in the fight where he can actually land those shots. I'm pretty sure he'll probably be telling Joshua to aim for the chest, because in the first fight, Joshua was punching a lot of his shots were towards Usyk's head. And Joshua has a good height advantage, you know. But when you're punching towards someone's head, the head is the smallest target on the body. You know, and Usyk is a very good head mover, bob and weave and moving. He just sees everything. So if you're aiming for the chest, that's a bigger, wider area. And if Usyk does that little crunching style that he does from time to time, and the little bob and weave left and right, you know, I think he'll have a better chance of landing some shots. And it doesn't matter if they land cleanly on the chin. If they're landing on, like, if Joshua's hitting you and he's touching you up on the shoulders, on the chest, and the body, in the solar plexus, all of these punches will, you know, have a taxing effect on Usyk, and they will help Joshua as the rounds go on. But if he goes all out guns blazing, then I do fear for his longevity in the fight, and I think Usyk will take him out.
Declan, it's a very different dynamic going into this one too, because last time around there was so much expectation on Anthony Joshua selling out Tottenham's new stadium, and it's a home fight, and it was meant to be the next step towards that huge all-British title fight that was going to happen with Tyson Fury, and that was the road it seemed everything was going down. And then Usyk provides a complete road bump and destroys all of those narratives and everything else. This time round, It's different for Usyk, though, isn't it? Because it's not like he's going in against the guy who's so heavily favoured. Now probably people are more aware and more respectful both of Usyk's position, but also the turmoil of the last 6 months within his own personal life, like going back to help out in Ukraine as part of the Russian invasion of the country, the kind of the weight of a nation sitting on him. He's made this available, as you mentioned, on YouTube for free within Ukraine by buying the rights to the fight himself. There's all sorts of different pressures maybe on Usyk that weren't there the last time around, where he was going in as the unfancied fighter in London.
Absolutely, you're absolutely hit the nail on the head, and I feel like that is the one big question mark in this fight, is that my initial thought when this fight was made, and it was, agreed that Usyk would leave the war and would go to Poland for his training camp and this fight would happen. My initial thought was, that's terrible news for Joshua, because you've got a guy who's leaving an active war zone to go and have a boxing match. It's easy. That's easy compared to what he was having to deal with at home. He's not going to leave a war zone and be overawed in any way, or in any way troubled by the fight with someone who he's already beaten comprehensively. But then when you really think about it, he's got his family, his family and friends, people he knows are there right now, like fighting in a war. His friends of his are in hospital, all this sort of stuff. And he's keeping up to date with it every day. Like when we spoke to him at the press conference in London, it was one of, by far, the best is probably the wrong word, but the most memorable sit down I've ever done with a boxer. Some of the stuff he was saying was just out of this world, like something from a film. And you wonder what effect that will have on him. I feel like it's going to galvanise him. And I feel like he's wired slightly differently to most humans.